very excited to talk about scientific errors in the Quran. Now, there was a list by Apostate Prophet of some
Mhm.
60 scientific
Yes.
errors, and I happened across two or three myself that were different than his list, so that list has actually grown a bit. And I'd like to start with a more lighthearted beginning, like the simplest, most trivial of them. That for me would start with Surah 105, Al Fil, also known as the elephant. And this is the story where we have birds bombing elephants with stones. Anybody
Mhm.
want to recant what that story is?
So this was basically where there was an army that was set off to attack the Kaaba, and God saved the Kaaba by basically having birds hold stones in their beaks, which basically bombarded, or it could be their claws, which bombarded the the uh, the invading army, and thus preventing the invasion of it, of the
Yeah,
destruction of the Kaaba.
yeah. But even if they were large birds,
which were not.
the largest stones they could
Hmm.
carry would not be sufficient to wipe out elephants, even on
Hmm.
direct hits. Which
Well, this
and
goes back to trying to make apply science to miracles. When God says He intercedes and He does this thing, then you can't apply science to that. So this
Okay, so
is done
God
inside some
speeds up
miraculous
the
way.
rocks, or He makes the rocks bigger and heavier, or He makes the birds bigger and heavier. In any case, we're
Hmm.
rendering the story moot. I mean, if something happens that is impossible in the story, the fact that it is impossible is what disproves the story. It
It
doesn't
does not
prove
disprove it
that
when
it is
God
miracle.
says, if it said the natural world works this way, where birds are going to pick up a stone. Actually, we don't know. If they could pick up like a pebble this big or so. I don't know. We don't even need to go there because this is not talking about the way the natural world works. This is talking about God interceding into the world, doing a miracle, which we do not apply science to miracles. We do
Yeah,
not
the
apply
reason.
science to Jesus walking on water, Muhammad healing sick people, or any of these things. It doesn't make sense. And I've never met anybody who says, "Yeah, I want to now apply science to Jesus walking on water." It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but it really should. People really should consider this. I mean, the reason
Hmm.
that these stories are being told and Jesus isn't even the first one to do that. It's like nothing Jesus ever did was he the first one to do it. Every one of his miracles are attributed to some other god at some other time, and it's amazing to me that people don't get that. I mean, like I was reading in college for the first time around. I was reading when I was a young man. I was reading something about uh, Bacchus, Dionysus, and I realized that he's using the same lines. The I am the vine, I am the fruit of the vine. He's using the same kind of terminology that Jesus later uses to describe himself. But he said Bacchus is minimum 500 years older than Jesus. At least the story that I'm reading is 500 years older. No telling how much older Bacchus is. But where Jesus turned water into wine by pouring a jug of water into a barrel of wine and then pouring wine out of the barrel, that's an easy trick. I've seen Penn and Teller do something like that. And but Bacchus made the springs of the earth spring forth wine, and that's a much better trick, and that's one that Penn and Teller could not do. So, and this was centuries before Jesus, so I had to realize that either Bacchus could turn water into wine just like Jesus could, or Jesus really couldn't do it either. Now, Christians have no problem telling me that Bacchus is completely made up. And why would they say that? Because the story that they're telling is ridiculous. That's the reason that they reject it. The
Hmm.
story of Jesus is equally ridiculous. Why don't you reject that? Special pleading.
Right. So I just sent you something in the chat. It gives a definition of a miracle. I just want to make sure we're all okay with this. It says an event that appears inexplicable by the laws of nature. So this is God coming in,
Yep.
and okay, and so my point here that we're going to find scientific errors if we're going to try to do this. Let's not use the ones where God says, "Okay, and I did it this way, and here is, for example, the creation of the earth, the creation of Adam." These were all specific miracles which God did. So you can't apply science to that. But we should talk about the way the natural universe works. Like, for example,
actually, for almost every claim of miracles, we actually can apply that. Now, the reason that I started with the birds is because it is the most trivial, and so it's surprising that you wouldn't retract even that. But that's fine.
How does this violate science? Do you have any science to tell us? First of all, when God says, I did this miracle thing, how are you going to apply science to this? It doesn't make any sense.
The way I opened this was by explaining how to apply science to it. That even a large bird would not be able to carry large enough stones. That even a flock of large birds carrying the largest stones that they can carry would not be able to stop an army of elephants.
You are presupposing that you know how God did this thing. How do you know this stuff? There's millions of ways God could allow this to happen.
And tell me what one of them might be.
Okay, so first of all, we're going back to the same fallacy of trying to apply science to miracles. Well, first of all, we don't even know how big a rock it's going to take to, if it fell like a pebble this big, if it fell and hit me on my head, what would happen at?
Just a second. It was pumice stone, and the terminal velocity in the lower atmosphere of our great, nice little planet Earth is about 160 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to get pumice stones.
That will do absolutely nothing to an elephant.
The Quran doesn't say pumice stone. The Quran doesn't. First of all, I think you're reading that in the Quran. Doesn't say that.
Hijaratun means sijil is pumice stone.
Yeah,
hijaratun means sijil.
Hajar. What is hajar? What does that mean?
What is a sijil?
It means a stone.
It's pumice stone.
Some kind of clay.
Stone. Pumice stone.
Okay, no, it was. So sigil means some kind of clay. So my point is that look, this is we're getting into kind of a ridiculous discussion here.
It's pumice stone. We know the specific.
We're going into where I'm addressing two guys at one time.
Just a second. We know the specific gravity of pumice stone. It literally floats in the water. It's very famous.
Whoa. We don't know what kind of stone this is. Okay, we just mean sigil from clay, and now something so hard, and you got 1 million birds up there, and they're dropping this at I don't know what altitude. Is that enough to deter an army from advancing? I don't know.
If you've got 1 million birds, then we're not talking about large birds.
Elephants are big and tough.
Yeah.
Throwing stones at them from any height isn't going to deter.
Okay, when we talk about science, listen, here's how we do Quran and science. When you make a claim of science that, oh, wait a second, a bird can get up at high and throw a big piece of rock this big, or a big piece of clay thing. And we don't know, because God can miraculously allow them to hold huge clay stones about this big, and you're made a claim of science that something like that dropping on the head of an elephant will be like, no, I don't care. Where are you getting this from? What reference are you getting this from?
Once again,
you cannot make up scientific fact, Boraz.
I didn't make a single scientific fact up
You
here.
did say that an elephant wouldn't care if a rock dropped out.
It wouldn't. If you dropped a pumice stone on an elephant at 160 clips an hour.
Where do you get pumice stone? First of all, where are you getting pumice stone from?
I don't care.
That's made up. The issue about how elephants are going to react to stones is made up.
If Allah said, if
Okay.
Allah said he threw pumice stone at them via bird.
Where does it say pumice? Boraz, show me the text where it says
the word
pumice.
sigil means pumice.
Okay, let's copy and paste that word, put it into Google, and you will see it just means some kind of clay stone. Okay? Would you like to do that?
Which is pumice stone.
Okay. If you want to
I started without the. I had no idea.
It is some kind of clay. Okay.
But it doesn't matter at the end of the day if it was.
No, it doesn't matter at the beginning of the day. I said at the start that it wouldn't matter what kind of stone it was.
Correct.
Yeah, if you couldn't get a bird big enough to carry a stone big enough that it would be able to stop an elephant. You certainly can't get 1 million.
In the natural world, yes.
Yeah, and so
you're right. In the natural world,
important question.
So your answer.
Actually, we don't know. Wait, let me back up. Let me back up. We don't know. The things you are talking about, the scientific claims you're talking about, a bird cannot pick up a stone this big, and if it falls on you, it's not going to hurt you. Where is your scientific reference for any of this?
Monty Python.
Okay. If we are going to claim Islam contradicts science, you have to show what science says from an authentic reference, and then you are going to show where the Quran contradicts that. And that's exactly the same standard you're going to hold me to.
Right.
So we
And so
can't have two different standards. Because when
we're
I
not
show you
using
where,
two different
where the
standards.
Quran agrees with modern science, I will show you the reference from science, not something I just made up or what I think, and then I'll show you where the Quran agrees with it. So we got to be on the same level playing field here,
Exactly.
okay?
And that's why I started with the
Yeah.
most trivial example I could
Mhm.
think of. Is there ever a time, could there be a time when we'd show you something in the Quran that shows that what the Quran said about that is wrong?
Yeah, for example, in my last debate with Jay Smith, we did exactly that. For example, the Quran said that the bees eat from the fruits, thamarat. And so they all jumped on, like, wait a second, do bees really eat fruit? So they did a quick online Google search and they found
Oh, we seem to have lost Nadir.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Oh,
hello.
no.
I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
think I just sorry about that. Am I back or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're back. We hear
you're
you.
back.
Okay, so
Okay,
that's
yeah.
good to
So
hear.
there are, in fact, you'll find that in the Bible as well. For example, there's a one inside the Bible where it says that where Jesus says that the mustard seed is the smallest seed that you plant in the ground. Today
Yeah.
we know it's not true. There are many falsifiable statements in the Quran that you can look up science and you can say, "Oh, wait a second, let's test the Quran against it. Let's do those." Is what I'm saying.
Okay, well that's what we're gonna do. And
Yeah.
we'll walk away from the bird thing. And it wasn't that I was making things up. I'm actually looking at the size of birds, what amount of weight can they carry in their talons and so forth. What kind of birds are these? How could you have if you had vultures? Vultures
Mhm.
maybe could carry a stone big enough and heavy enough that it might impair an elephant for a moment.
Mhm.
But
Your
not enough
mistake
to
here,
stop an elephant.
Aaron. You're talking about the natural world, how the natural
Of
world
course,
works.
because that's what we
But
got.
but you cannot apply that here.
Well, then
And
why
I
don't
feel
we
you're
just say that the birds breathed fire on them or launched missiles at them?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I think you're blocking out a little bit.
Okay, well, why don't we
Well, what
just
did you
say that
say?
the birds? Why don't we just say that the birds were rocket propelled and launched missiles or breathed fire?
Why don't we just say that this was a miracle of God? And once God said, "Look, I did this thing," we don't apply science to it. It's
But we
beyond science. We
do
don't know how
apply
God could have
science.
miraculously did this
When
things.
the claim of a miracle is that a man was swallowed by a fish and he lived inside a fish for 3 days, we say, no, that's absurd. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to believe that stupid story. It doesn't matter how much magic you lump on top of it. It's still going to be a ridiculous story. It's still impossible.
That's ad ridiculum. You see the point where the fallacy here is you think just because you see something as ridiculous that can discount it as being true. So this is a
Yes,
logical fallacy of ad ridiculum,
that's not a logical fallacy.
and
If
people
something
see
is
atheism as
impossible,
being ridiculous.
if something is impossible, then it's impossible. That means that's how we discredit the story, and that's what you would do with any myth come from any other religion, but not with your own. So this is how we determine this thing is
Hey,
impossible. The flood, the worldwide flood, we know that that's impossible, so that didn't happen. You can lump all kinds of miracles on, and believe me, Christians do. God can do whatever he wants. I had one today. Somebody said, if a God could do anything he wants, then why couldn't he flood the whole world? Of course he can. No, even if God existed, he still can't flood the whole world. It doesn't matter. You want to say magic. It doesn't matter. If it's impossible, it's impossible. We don't get to make up excuses for how it could have still happened.
Well, we don't have any scientific, and even we'll just go through the natural process. We don't have any scientific data as far as how big of a stone, let's say an eagle, a bald eagle could pick up in his mouth. We don't have any science to look at to prove or disprove this. You're just thinking off the top of your head of what you might think is
the
possible.
most trivial example. I thought it would be the most.
Okay, this is a bad example. Let's go to a real good example.
It is the worst example that I have, and that's why I started with that. Do you get the point now?
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, that's why I brought that one up, because it was the most trivial. So in the second one, not quite so much. Surah 54. Now this is the one where Muhammad claims to have broken the moon in half. And this goes back to what you were saying about when we were talking about Surah 7. You said that believers could see any miracle and they still wouldn't believe it. So the story here is that Muhammad broke the moon in two, and the people saw it and said, well, that was just a magic trick. And they didn't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
What is your take on that story?
So this once again goes example of which Muhammad did. So when I look at this, I don't see how this agrees or disagrees with science once it explains itself as a miracle. But now the Quran said that the moon splits itself in half, and this is the way the natural world works. In that context, then yes, it would contradict science, but that's not the context.
So you're saying that Muhammad actually broke the moon in two?
This is one of the many miracles which Muhammad did, correct.
Okay. And the fact that nobody saw it outside of the people standing around looking at it with him,
Mm-hmm.
nobody in the world saw this thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, where's your evidence for that nobody saw it?
Well, where's the evidence that anybody saw it? You think somebody might have noticed? You think the Chinese, the Egyptians? You think the Greeks?
This is the argument from silence.
Broken in half?
This is the argument from silence, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the problem where you say, I did something so visible and so obvious
that everybody in the world would see it. But
everyone in the face of the planet would have had sleepless nights about it.
But did the Quran
it would
claim
have been
that?
the biggest story around the world, period. Even if Muhammad put it right back together again in the same minute, it still would be in everybody's folklore, at least on that side of the planet. Everybody that could see the moon at that time, everybody in that same time zone, certainly, and other time zones around it. You'd have the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians. They would have all seen it. The Persians. Everybody would have known about that event.
So here's how I would respond to that.
Just a second.
One thing, guys, the rules here. And as I talked to Aron before, I said, listen, if we are going to discuss alleged scientific errors in the Quran, then we can't have this like 2 against 1. It's like once he says something, then I got to respond. Then you can jump in and say something that I'll respond to. That way it'll be fair.
Okay, respond to it. I have another. I was just going to add a little bit of an elucidation to the question. I was going to mention that.
So the answer is simply this.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. The answer is simply this. If we look through history, we'll find that we don't have a lot of stuff which really did happen in writing. For example, where is the engineering manual for the building of the pyramids? How do they move 80-ton blocks of stone across the desert? Where are the manuals for any of this? We don't have it. We do. Without interrupting, hold on, guys. Let me just continue.
We do have the manuals.
Okay, we have the engineering manual for how the pyramids were built. Okay, I'd like to see that.
But anyway, we figured it out.
All right. Another example is that there's many advanced ancient civilizations which is disappeared without any trace of writing as far as what happened to them. There's no evidence of war, earthquake, or anything. There was one inside Malta. Google keyword search as Malta advanced civilization disappeared. So we don't have a writing on a lot of stuff here. So this is a logical fallacy of appeal to authority. But this isn't really an issue of contradicting with science. It's a matter of, do we have historical references for some of the things the Quran says? And no, the answer is no. Not everything you're going to find is going to be recorded in history. But I feel this one's a little bit off topic. But anyway,
I was going to elucidate. Aron is having connection issues.
Is that Aron?
Aron is having connection issues.
Yeah, I thought that was my end. I'm sorry.
No.
You have connection issues. Do you want to reboot?
Yeah, my router says I'm good. You can hear me now?
Okay. Yeah, it's better now.
Now you're good. Yeah.
I love the
anything you said before.
I love the example of Malta because that was their underground necropolis is quite impressive, and that thing is 6,000 years old, and of course Christians, many of them will tell you that the earth is only 6,000 years old. Well, where did the people in Malta come from? But I'm not making an appeal to authority. It's not an authority that you want to say that there's rare exceptions that disappeared without a trace. Okay, fine, there are rare exceptions, but if you broke the moon in half, absolutely everybody would have seen that on this. I mean, every culture would have seen that. Somebody would have noticed. Everybody would have made a big deal out of it. It would have been huge news on 3 continents. at least. And so,
yeah.
so
There is a lot of history which we don't have.
well, there's also
We don't know how these pyramids were built. Everybody saw these pyramids, yet we don't have any writing as far as how they did it. The engineering manual's missing. We have a lot of missing stuff. So this doesn't prove or disprove anything. We want to talk about science. How did the Quran contradict science?
We are
Not whether
talking science.
yeah.
There's also the fact that the moon was never broken into. That's kind of an important fact, I think.
Again, this goes back to the issue of miracles. Can God do something like that?
Well,
So-
if we're going to argue that God could create a worldwide flood, even when we know that that's impossible,
We don't believe in that.
and so and I know, but the Christians use that argument. They use that argument today on me in my Facebook. Somebody says, "Well, God can do anything He wants. Of course, He can flood a spherical Earth." No, you don't get to say, "Well, it's impossible, therefore it happened." No, it's impossible, therefore it didn't happen. That's the rule.
Mhm.
You don't get to just say, "Well, everything is a miracle." That everything that I want to believe and I don't want to admit to. But we know
No, that's-
the fact is
There's legitimacy to that.
The
I'll
moon
agree
never
with
broken
them.
in half.
Okay, what you're doing, these, let's just make it clear what these so-called alleged scientific errors of the Quran are. You're actually going to the claims of miracle, and you're applying science to miracles. Is this all you have for us tonight?
No.
Okay,
build.
let's not go to the miracles, and let's go to
Okay.
the real falsifiable statements.
Okay, we're headed.
So I will concede to this. We agree. We all agree on this in the sense this. If you apply science to miracles, like how Jesus walked on water or whatever that miracle is, and you really do something like that, well, then you're going to find a lot of contradictions in science.
Okay,
But
so
my
how
point
did-
is,
how
you
did
shouldn't
God-
do that.
how did God or Muhammad or whoever is doing this? How did he put the moon back together in such a way that it was never broken it apart?
We don't know, and we actually don't care.
Okay, so we don't know. We don't have to know. Just believe the fable, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how impossible it is. We're going to believe it anyway.
What really bothers me
That's
is
just ad ridiculum.
It is.
It's compared to, let's say, a lesser event like the Tunguska event. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
Okay. I think it's the middle of the 18th century, and there was an event in the middle of what was Russia back then. And it seems to be a meteorite that exploded just before it reached the Earth. And it lit up the sky for weeks after that. It was a major event. A lot lesser than what cracking the moon in half would have been. And literally, there are thousands of news articles about it. People were talking about it. We still can read the references to this event. We still find it in the paintings that were painting at that time, that people painted the sky lit at night just to show you that something weird was happening. And you're going to say, forget about any scientific evidence here. Okay, you're going to say, I split the moon in two, and nobody noticed in the world. Nobody.
Miracle.
Even,
No, I'm not
So
saying
God-
nobody noticed in the world.
God blinked everybody's memory blank. And God undid
Hold on a
time for that minute, so that the only people who understood that they were even time traveling was Muhammad and the 7 people standing around him.
Okay.
Whatever, we can make up any kind of excuse we want when we're
I
arguing.
think problem is, I feel you struggle to understand what a miracle is. It's almost like
No,
you have this
I have
animosity
full- I
towards
have
miracles.
full grasp. I have
Yeah.
full grasp
Yeah.
of what a miracle is.
Right.
we know
Yeah.
what a miracle
So-
is. The
Definition.
problem is,
I'll tell you what,
it's a
Perez,
bad
you said you
answer.
got the engineering manual to how those pyramids were built. We got pyramids inside Egypt. We got them, I think, in Mexico. You got some pyramids.
know.
You got the engineering manual for that?
Yeah.
Where is that? When
Well-
you show me the engineering manual for the pyramids, then I'll show you a reference
Now,
for
my argument was
the
we
moon
don't have that,
for the
and the
moon being
reason we
split in
don't
half.
have it is because they didn't know how to write manuals in hieroglyphics.
They didn't
Wait,
write
whoa, 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 whoa.
engineering
You didn't know how to
manuals.
write manuals?
Okay, well,
How were they engineering this?
for engineering manual that the Egyptians wrote explaining how they built the pyramids. And I was
But-
arguing that they wouldn't have written one because what would you write an engineering manual in hieroglyphics?
Okay, this seems like conjecture. We don't have the history of Malta, of how they
No,
disappeared. We
and-
don't
and-
have a lot. We could probably agree most of history which happened back then, is gone. We don't have this. We got
Right.
scant of it.
Except for one small problem when it comes to the pyramids.
Yeah.
They are still there. You
But
can
where's the
see
manual?
them.
The history of that stuff is gone.
Are you insinuating it was aliens?
No, what I'm saying is I'd like to read the manual on how they
We
did
know a
these
lot.
things.
We
That's
know a lot
irrelevant.
about how
The
Egyptians built
point
the
is,
Guys, we
know the
can't prove
moon-
or disprove the story or the narration of the the moon splitting in half. This is going nowhere. Let's
All right,
move on.
Right, it's going nowhere. We know the moon was never broken in two, but Nadir is
That's
not
your-
going to admit that. So
Where's the evidence? This is you're
Where's
right.
the evidence?
Look, we agree.
Where's the
We
evidence
agree
that
that,
the moon was
when
never
you apply
broken in two?
science to miracles.
Did you actually ask me for evidence that the moon was never broken in two?
Did I ask you for evidence that the moon was never broken in half?
Yeah, I said we know that the moon was never broken in half, and you said, "Where's your evidence?"
Okay. No, I didn't. I didn't say that.
Okay, my
No,
apologies.
I think you might have misunderstood me. Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
we
let's
move on to
the next one, because this was another. What you're doing, you're grabbing the miraculous story, the miraculous claims where God said, "I did these things," and interceding into nature, and scientific error. If that's all you have tonight, then I think it's going to be a very long.
Certainly not
But
all.
let's move on to the next one.
I have.
Okay, let's move on to the next one.
The apostate prophets list was some 60 items, and I added 3 to that. The one we just covered was one that was on his list, the moon being broken in half, which we know never happened, but that's okay. You're not going to get past it. So we'll move on to our number 3.
There's no way you can prove or disprove that.
Yeah. We know that there's you can't make, and I know religion does, and that's the problem, because religion has exactly the reverse logic. In science, you do not assert as fact baseless speculation as though it were a matter of fact. You don't say that this happened when there's nothing to indicate that happened. You don't do that. It's called dishonesty. If you claim facts that are not facts, or pretend to know things you don't actually know, like making up statistics out of your own head or whatever, when you assert things as being true when there's no basis for it, we call that lying. In every application except religion, where suddenly religion does exactly what everybody else would call lying, and then they call it absolute truth. So in religion, you can assert anything you want to. You can say that you know these things. You can say you have a personal relationship with whatever God you made up. Doesn't matter. You can assert all these things, and you can cite all kinds of facts you want to, but it doesn't work that way in science.
I think you hit it on the nose, where the problem isn't really the moon being split in half. The problem really isn't birds, picking up stones to destroy an army or prevent them from attacking. The problem is a belief in a God and a religion which you feel contradicts science, and therefore it's just a big lie and lies. This is what your position is. Okay.
That's
right. Then in that sense, if you start with that viewpoint, then Islam contradicts science, and as well as every other religion, based on your view. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that view, if you have a more objective view, a more scientific view,
no. I am the more objective view. I am the more objective view.
Okay. Well, if you start with the premise that we cannot confirm, or because we haven't seen any evidence of it, we are not going to affirm it, but we're not going to deny it as well. That's a more, I would say, a more logical, reasonable approach.
Right. That's the way I take that one, because we don't assert things are true when there is no evidence that they are true. So lacking evidence of a thing counts as evidence against that thing, in the sense that we don't say that this happened if there's no evidence that happened. Since nobody saw the moon broken in half, and there's no indication on the moon that it had ever been broken in half, we therefore have evidence that the moon was never broken in half. That counts.
Nobody saw Jesus walk on water. Nobody saw him heal the blind. Therefore, it's all wrong in your viewpoint. Okay,
not just continue. In my viewpoint, but when you make an empty assertion that is not based on fact, that's correct.
When you make the assertion, which you did, that the moon was indeed broken in half, we sent rockets there. We had people look at the moon. We have seismic data from the moon. There is no crack in the moon.
Yeah,
didn't happen.
Keep applying science to miracles, and That's all I can say. I cannot stop you guys from trying to apply scientific reason to miracles of whether it's a flood story. If
And
you
we
guys
can't
want to do
get
that,
you.
you
We
continue.
can't get
Let's
you
move
to
on to the next.
understand that you should
Yeah.
apply reason instead
Mhm.
of faith. I mean, that's the thing. That's the big crux here.
We're
We're
going to
applying
agree to
reason and we're
disagree.
not.
We're going to have to agree to disagree on this point. Let's move on.
All right, moving on. And again, we have ways of proving these things, but if you didn't accept that, I don't know how you're going to accept any of them. My number 3 is also one of apostate prophets' list of 60, and this is from Surah 96. Verse 2, he created man from a clinging form, and this is what apostate prophet described as sperm becomes blood. And the footnotes say, alak, clinging form, can also mean anything that clings, a clot of blood, a leech, or even a lump of mud. Here in the modern day, we're supposed to interpret this as an embryo, but back then, whoever wrote the command or the Quran apparently thinks that humans develop from a blood clot.
Okay, so this is Surah 96, verse what?
96, verse 2.
96, verse 2. It says over there that Khalaqa insan, he created man from something which clings. Okay? And your issue on that?
What is something that clings?
Well, do you see this as contradicting science in any way?
Kind of roughly,
It's
yeah.
a contradiction of the story, because God was supposed to have made us out of clay, and we know that we were not made out of clay either. But now we have a contradiction that God created us out of something that clings, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. Well, this goes back to where our agreement to agree to disagree on. When God said that he created Adam out of clay, this is something which is a miracle. God created Adam with his own hands, and he used clay as, you could say, as one of the materials to create him. So how do you apply science to that? You cannot. This is something, as I've given you the definition of what a miracle is an event that appears inexplicable by the laws of nature. But if you want to continue to apply science to miracles, then yes, you will find all kinds of contradictions of science. But I don't think that's a reasonable thing to do.
If we just want to say anything is a miracle, so it doesn't matter how absurd it is, then we could equally say that God made man out of a 57 Chevy. Doesn't matter.
If God wants to make Adam with a big green tail and 7 heads, there's no way you can prove or disprove that.
Yep.
You just say this is what this is. Cannot confirm or deny that.
We could take a stick and arc weld it to a lump of ice, and anything is possible when we evoke miracles, so that there's no kind of reason available anymore.
That's true.
It doesn't matter how silly the story is; we would just believe it because we're going to.
That's ad ridiculum. This goes back. This is a subjective.
Once again, it goes back to the rule that
understanding.
if a thing is impossible, that's what rules that the story is wrong.
But what you don't understand is atheism is more ridiculous to some people, like myself, than this story. So I prefer to believe in this.
How could it be ridiculous to anybody to not believe unsupported assertions of impossible absurdity?
We're not going to open up that can of worms. All I'm just telling you is I can be very subjective about this as well, and I can say, okay, that's ridiculous to me too.
As well. I'm trying to get you to be
this
objective.
Is the fallacy of ad ridiculum.
I'm being objective. You are not.
Mm-hmm. When you say this is ridiculous, that's subjective. Okay.
So
it is ridiculous in the sense that it is impossible. And you're saying that impossible still counts, that we don't need to apply science. Well, if you're not going to apply science, that itself is a contradiction of where the Quran.
That's not what I said. I said we don't apply science to miracles. If you don't want to accept that, that's fine. Let's move on. You don't want to accept this, that's fine. Let's keep going.
All right. Our next one, also from apostate prophets list, sex is determined after creation. This is Surah 53, verses 45 to 46. 45 says that he himself created the two sexes, male and female. 46, from an ejected drop of sperm.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that verse again? Which one was it?
That he himself created the two sexes, male and female. Oh, Surah 53, verse 45 and 46.
Okay, so what do you feel here contradicts science?
Well, that sex is determined later, and also the other there's another error that's incorporated in this one and the subsequent verse that we're going to talk about, where sperm equals human, because Muhammad or whoever wrote this obviously wasn't aware that there's such a thing as a human egg.
Okay, well, let's do one at a time here. The verse was which one?
Surah 53, 45, 46.
Okay, 45 through 46. Okay, 45, 46. Okay, and he created the two mates, the male and the female, from a sperm drop when it is emitted. Okay, so how does this explain to me how this contradicts science again?
Okay, what I just explained was two problems here. One of and they're both listed as separate errors on this list.
Mm-hmm.
One is that sex is determined after the creation, or when we understand that there's a zygote when two gametes meet, which the author of the Quran was obviously not aware of. He thinks that sperm is the only ingredient, and that takes
what it says here is that the sperm is a determining factor for gender.
Well, actually, what it says here is that he created the sexes, male and female, from an ejected drop of sperm. So there's no mention.
There are other things that wrong with this, not just that he created
I can only address one at a time. Boraz, let me just address his claim here. So when it says, and he created two mates, the male and the female, from a sperm drop. Okay, so when you say from a sperm drop, it could also mean that this is what determines male and female, right?
Not necessarily.
No.
Yeah.
I don't think it.
Why would you?
I don't
specifically. What it's saying is that all people, regardless of their gender, are created from a drop of sperm, which is our error number 5. That sperm.
Wait a second. Okay, so now here we go back to what's the interpretation onto the Quran. So you are right. If the Quran said that the human being is actually a sperm drop, and that's all there is, just a sperm drop, then that would be a scientific error. But this goes back to
that's what it says.
The fallacy, which
it says it here, and it says it elsewhere.
One at a time. So this goes back to the issue of the double standard here. When I were to show you in the Quran that the Quran agrees with modern science, it has to state there explicitly that this science actually exists. And so I'm going to hold you to the same standard where I'm going to ask you where in the text does it explicitly, not your interpretation, but explicitly states that the human being, all of him, is a sperm drop. That's not what it states.
46,
there.
Verse 46 says
46,
exactly that. Explicitly,
it does not. It states inside Surah 40. Okay, Surah 46.
That man is formed out of a drop of sperm mixed with an egg. No, it says that man is created, and only out of a drop of sperm. There's no egg.
No egg.
Well, hold on a second. It said he created the two mates, which is talking about the male and the female,
and he misses the egg.
Sperm drop.
And he misses the egg.
Wait a second. It's talking about.
There would be no.
Gender.
Just a second.
That is scientifically correct.
No.
Hold on, guys.
There would be no human.
Correct.
There would be no human being.
Do you disagree with the fact that the male sperm determines the male or the female? Do you disagree with that?
No, I don't disagree with that. But we are not made from ejected drop of sperm.
Only. It does not say wait, hold on a second. What the text says.
Where is it? Verse 37 that mentions mixed with an egg?
Hold on a second. This is talking about that the gender is dependent upon the sperm. That's what it says here. And he creates the two mates, the male and female, from a sperm drop.
So it doesn't say, Dan, and that the sperm determines the gender. It says God determines the gender, and that he makes people from and only from an ejected drop of sperm and not from any other thing.
Wait a second. So you're saying, again, I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying because the egg is missing from here.
Very much
saying
so.
God is saying that the egg is not being used at all. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's also there's a number of errors in this one, because God says he is correcting, or he's determining the sex, male and female, from an ejected drop of sperm, when actually the drop of sperm It is actually got lots of
The
tiny
actual
in it.
text says, here, exactly as it says in English, that the male and the female is from the sperm drop. So that is scientifically correct. We know now from science that the sperm is what determines the male and the female. Now, the fact that the egg is not mentioned over here, it is an argument, the fallacy of an argument from silence. Just because something is not mentioned doesn't negate it. So,
Okay.
for example, if I were to give you an example, if I were to say, dude, where's my car? And you stay silent. There, I know you took my car. This is an argument from silence, and that's
obviously
a
not
fallacy
what's
you're
happening
committing
here.
here.
That's not what's happening here.
Okay.
There is a misstatement here in that we are not made
What?
out of sperm. We're just not. That's just factually incorrect.
If the Quran said, wait a second, that's the Quran doesn't say you are made out of sperm. That's not what the text said. That's your interpretation. But even if it does say that, it says you. It's specifically stated. It didn't say you. It said the male and the female is from the sperm drop, not you.
Yep.
And so that if you read the text about the gender determination of male and female from the sperm, that is right.
And it's also saying that
I don't see where you're.
When in fact a drop of sperm is something like 15 million individual sperms, all but one fail to make their fertilization race. So it's not God that's making these. God is not creating anything, and the sperm is determining the gender, but we are not made out of the sperm.
Okay, where in the text it says you are made out of sperm?
Again, the one and keep pointing to is 46.
It doesn't say you are made out of sperm. That's your interpretation.
It says from it, 45 mixed with that says created the two sexes, male and female, from an ejected drop of sperm. No other thing. That the implication is explicitly clear. We are made out of sperm, which goes to our error number 5, that sperm equals human.
Okay.
And in that verse, in Surah 80, 17, 18, and 19, it says, woe to man, how ungrateful he is. From what thing, individual, single thing, does God create him? He creates him from a droplet and proportions to him. That's it. It's the one single thing clarified.
I will agree with you that if the Quran stated that you are made up of, you are created from sperm in a sense like it's like a skin and bones or something like that. If it stated that, even then that's so vague. I wouldn't know what to do with that. But then there may be some justification to what you're saying. But it doesn't say that.
Okay, how about Surah 75? It does say that.
Hold on a second.
In Surah 75, verse 37, 38, and 39. Was he not just a drop of spilt out sperm? Not a spilt out sperm and an egg, but he was just a drop of spilt out sperm, which became a clinging form, which is clarified what the other verse says. So now we know that a clinging form is just sperm, not egg, which God has shaped in due proportion, fashioning from it the two sexes, male and female, clarifying what we said before, explicitly showing by your own admission that this is a scientific error in the Quran.
No, it's not a scientific. Let's go back to, first of all, let's just finish what we just agreed on, chapter 53.
Was he not just a spilt out sperm?
Yes. So, and that is absolutely true. We come from sperm. Absolutely.
And
the egg. DNA and all of it.
So it is an incorrect statement. It is factually false. Surah 75:37 is factually false when it says that we are just a spilt out sperm.
Only sperm is mentioned. Look, the problem here is it looks like I'm going to say something here. It looks like Allah has run out of lines and couldn't mention the egg. The ova doesn't exist for Allah. Did not create a human. If Allah only said, I created the human being from a sperm and an ova,
Yeah, if there was an
We would
explanation,
have no argument.
if there was an explanation in
Mhm.
there that say people didn't know at that time, say like God talks about microbes and their effect, or says that that humans have eggs just like birds do, except that human eggs have
Mhm.
no shells and they are much too small to be seen.
Okay.
That
So
would be impressive, because there would be no way that people would have known that at that time. But of course, it doesn't. Everything
okay,
we
I
read in
can't.
the Quran exactly matches what the scholars of the time already knew,
Okay,
or already knew
let's.
wrong.
I can only address one guy at a time. Now I've got like three people. Of three times I got. Aaron went, and then Boraz went, and then Aaron went again. So I'm getting piled
All
up
right,
over
my
here.
apologies
So
for
let me
that.
just. Yeah. Okay. Now let me back up. Which surah was that? Was it Surah 55?
Let me grab my note. Hold here, one moment,
Yeah.
please. For the line about being just a drop of spilled out sperm was Surah 75, verse 37.
Surah 75, verse 37. Let me pull that
75.
up.
It's Surah 75, verse 37.
Okay, let's go there.
Now, my comment on that was that there is no one who can cause the shape or development of a fetus, no one who needs to do this, as the cell does it all on its own, literally without a thought. God
Okay.
did not shape any proportion. The fusion of two haploid gametes to produce a diploid zygote is basic biology now, but
Mhm.
Muhammad couldn't have known about the chemical selection of X and Y chromosomes to determine sex. That's why you
Okay,
have
let
the
me.
story when in the only thing they could see was sperm, and they didn't know that a drop of sperm would be millions of actual sperms. They just thought it was
So you're
liquid.
okay. Let me just kind of reiterate just to make sure I fully understand your positions because it's complicated. You're saying because it emits a lot of information like the egg and how they unite and all the science behind that. Therefore, this is scientifically incorrect. Is that
It's not
correct? Is
just
my
what it
understanding
it's
correct?
it's not just what it left out, it's what it deliberately excluded. So was he not just a drop of spilt out sperm? So
Could you
that
have
meaning
said something else
there
and he
can be
didn't?
no other thing. It's not that we emitted out of sperm and an egg, but we didn't bother to mention the egg because no, just sperm. That's what
The
it's
word.
explicitly
Okay. So
states. Which
okay.
it then goes into verse 38 to explain that is what the clinging form is. So again, we got three verses where say we're made entirely only out of sperm and not from any other thing.
Okay, because you see the word just, you feel like, oh, I'm sorry, because you see the word just, your understanding is that the Quran is saying that the human being is only created and no egg and anything
Actually,
else is what you're saying.
what I got was I had two other references prior to that didn't have the word just in it. And when
Mhm.
we were talking about that, you said, well, if it explicitly stated that, well, then I would concede my point. But you know what? It explicitly stated that in the very next one that I mentioned by use of the
Well,
word just, eliminating
7537 is what
anything
you're talking
else.
about. 7537 is what you're saying says just.
7537. Was he not just a drop of spilt out sperm?
Okay, so in the chat, I just actually sent you a link of the Quran translation where you can hover your your mouse over each word, and it'll give you the exact translation or the exact English word. So alam yaku nutfatin, which is a sperm, min many, or you could say a drop. I'm sorry, a spot min many, which is sperm, yumna emitted. I don't see the word just in here.
What does 38 says?
So 37, as I'm reading it here, had he not been a sperm from semen emitted. And again, no mention of egg. This is the sole
Okay.
criteria.
Now let me address this. Okay, so I think the
The
mistake.
next version before you
Hold
address
on, guys. I can only
the
address one at a time. This is
next version ثم كان علقة فخلق فسوى.
okay. So
He's
let me.
already tying into the alaqa before that.
Okay. So
The
there's
clinger.
okay. So now there's a couple of problems here. You see, the first thing is the word that we. This is problem here is that This is an interpretation of an interpretation type fallacy. The
No,
first thing here. Okay, guys.
this is the
Okay.
Arabic right on my screen right there.
Okay. Okay, guys.
I
Time
don't
out.
interpret
Time out.
interpretations.
As I told you in the beginning, I can't do two against one. It's really difficult. And let me address one person And then once I've addressed that, then you can come with your objection. Then I'll address you, because doing a 2-on-1, 3-on-1, it's really difficult, especially when I'm on the defensive here. It's really difficult. So please, and let's not cut each other off like that. So I just tried to start talking and I was already cut off. Okay. This fallacy or this so-called scientific error in the Quran is not really even based upon an interpretation. It is an interpretation of what you think the word just means. But the problem is the word just isn't even in the text. So what I've done, I've given you a helper type link here where you can hover the mouse.
I was already on the same page.
I'm on the same page, by the way.
I was
So
already.
the Quran does not state that. The Quran does not say that you are only created from sperm and nothing else. That's not what the text of the Quran says.
That actually
and this is
what
an
it says in
argument.
the previous two references as well as this one. And then
Okay, so 7537 doesn't work.
And then
okay, 7537 doesn't work. Which one works?
When we look at 39, verse 39, and made of him, so we already have the gender established, two mates, the male and the female. So we start male.
Okay, wait a second. Are we done?
No. He just saying he created male and female out of that.
Well, why does it say and made of him?
No. Made of that alaqa. Yeah, correct.
If you look at all of them together, and this is referring to man, had he not been a sperm of semen emitted, then he was a clinging clot, and Allah created his form and proportioned him, which again is not necessary because it's all done automatically by the cells. And then the next verse, and made of him two mates, the male and female.
No, I think the him is reference to the alaq.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Because inside
it's talk about man. Does man think that he will be neglected? Had he not been a sperm of semen emitted, then he was a clinging clot.
Okay, I think there's a lot of information overload here, but as Boraz was telling you, you see, in Arabic, everything from the clot are either male or female. So just from him, that doesn't mean it's talking about from specifically a human being like a male or female. Words are either male or female. So, but let me go back. Okay. I'm a little bit stuck on, I think we a lot of information is being thrown at me because I'm trying to play defense from 2 against 1 here. But I want to make sure before
I want to express one other thing. I do actually appreciate that you're on the show doing this with us. I want you to know that I appreciate your being here for that. And I'm sorry that Bogey and I will sometimes both hit on the same point. I'm trying to minimize the number of times that happens.
Okay, thanks. So I want to make it first clear that chapter 75, verse 37 doesn't have the word just, which from an interpretation of that word would mean that you're only created from sperm. That's not what the text of the Quran says. Can we agree on that?
At best, that would be half of what we are, and that should have been made explicit. But I think we agree the Quran, for whatever reason, now you'll say it's justified, but the fact is it does not mention that the woman provides the other half of our genetic material or in anything about that.
Mm-hmm. It's an argument from
nothing according to the Quran.
Well, that's an argument from silence. Just because the Quran doesn't state something doesn't mean that it's
not
negating
an argument
it.
from silence to say the fact that the Quran doesn't say this. It in fact doesn't say this. It doesn't say the woman contributes anything, does it?
Is it negating it?
It kind of is.
Implication, I would say, have to say yes.
That's your interpretation.
I mean,
regardless, what do you want to call it? What do you want to call the obvious conclusion? My interpretation. Fine. The point is, it does not state that the woman contributes anything to what we are. Nothing. We are a sperm, and that's it, and that's all. And we all came from the father, not the mother. It gives no explanation for why we should also continue traits from her side. There's nothing in there about
now, let me respond to that. I think
just a second before you respond.
One at a time, Brad. One at a time.
Yeah, but
so this goes back to there's a lot of fallacies which I'm seeing at play here. There's an argument from silence that just because the Quran doesn't mention something, guys, don't cut me off.
You haven't gotten a fallacy right yet. You've accused me of a whole bunch of fallacies I did not make. So stop.
I understand that. I'm going to do it. Listen, we got to agree to disagree on a lot of things here. Okay, so I'm going to say things you're not going to like. I'm going to say things you're not going to like. Well,
You say
let me give
things
you
I
my
don't like,
understanding.
but understand that I didn't make any fallacies.
Okay, I'm gonna give you my what I feel is a mistake on what you said. Okay, the first thing is applying signs to miracles. That what I felt. Again, we can
Which
agree
is
to
not a
disagree.
mistake.
Is a
We
fallacy.
agree to disagree on that.
Okay, we can agree to disagree on that. Second thing
I
is
have to apply reason. You have to apply faith. I get it.
yeah. The text of the Quran doesn't explicitly say that you are only created from a sperm. That's not in the Quran, but rather because it didn't mention the other stuff like eggs and what happens after that, because it didn't mention that, I believe, and we can agree to disagree, that's an argument from silence. And an argument from silence is something like this: dude, where's my car? And you just stay silent. There, you see, I knew you took my car. That's an argument from silence.
Right. You
So
explained
this
why,
is
you
what I
explained why
believe
that
is an argument from
accusation did
silence.
not apply to me earlier, though you didn't understand why you explained it that way. But okay,
Yeah.
so
And no one has ever
does,
believed that, by the way.
it does
Nobody, if
say,
you look at Islamic history, no one has ever looked at this verse and negated the fact that a woman has no contributing factor just because the sperm was mentioned but not the
the
egg.
fact
You know?
is that the Quran does not mention any contribution from the
Yes.
woman at all. It says that we were made of a sperm. It does not say that we were made of a sperm mixed with anything. It does not say there was
Mhm.
any other component. It says only that we were made of sperm. Do you agree with the fact?
No, it doesn't say that. The text of the
Tell me
Quran
where
doesn't
it
say that at
mentions
all.
egg or other
Wait, hold on, guys. Let me answer without getting cut off. It does not even state that. It doesn't say you only created from sperm. When the verse which you quoted before, that verse said the male and the female from the sperm, which
Right.
is scientifically correct. Today we know that the sperm is what determines male and female,
Yeah,
and that's
only what
explicitly
determines gender.
stated.
It doesn't determine what we are.
No,
So,
but the Quran didn't say that. That's good.
so
And
in
actually, we don't know. It could determine more. We don't know as far as
Okay,
again. This
so
goes back to genetic
if
mapping.
okay, so if you read these verses together, what's the role of the woman in this?
If you just look at over here, we would remain silent because we don't know.
So
And
no
if
role,
yeah,
because
no, whoa. I'm saying we would remain silent
if
we
you're just a
yeah,
second,
yeah.
if you're familiar with the language of the Quran, it's very specific. It's very specific in the detail of 1, 2, 3 things when it keeps mentioning them over and over again in many other places. And there is no role for the female apart
Yeah.
from existing as a fertile ground. She
I
does
think
not.
we have said
Never
enough.
mentioned to contribute genetically to the offspring in any of the cases. That's not a by silence. If it was by the silence, you say, there was plenty of opportunity to mention it at least once. Just a little bit of a credit here. Okay, she contributes 50% of your genome, whether you like it or not, and she gets zero mention in the Quran towards her contributions.
We agree on this. Listen, here's what we agree. The Quran does not explicitly state that the woman has no role in the creation of man. We agree on that. It doesn't explicitly state that. But what you are sharing with me is your personal expectation and desire of what the verse should state in there. So this is what we can agree on and disagree on. Aron, did you
But
hear that?
isn't my expectation rational? Like
Well,
if you
let me
I'll put it in perspective here. You are the creator of the universe, the knower of everything. You want to impress the people you want to impress so that you're God, right? You want to impress them. That's why the Quran exists, right?
That's the intention fallacy. So
but why does it exist though? It wants to tell people about how great Allah is.
So
right?
we not only do we, again, this is where we're going to agree to disagree. Not only do we have the argument from silence fallacy, but now this is a new fallacy which is being introduced called the intention fallacy. And the intention fallacy is when a person looks at a work of art or some kind of book and says, I know the real intention behind that verse. Here's what it is. This is called the intention fallacy.
Okay,
But what we agree,
forget about the intention fallacy. It's not important. It's not important.
Let me continue. So what we can agree is the Quran does not explicitly say that the woman has no contributing factor to who you are. That's
Where
not
does it
explicitly
say?
stated
Where
by
does
the
it
text of
say
the Quran.
she does? Where
Hold on a
does it
second.
say she does? Because now you're making stuff about the Quran.
Hold on a second. You guys are interrupting me. We can only have one guy at a time talk here.
Well,
Okay.
you're talking.
Okay,
Go
so
ahead.
but you're interrupting me. So let's not turn this into an argument. So
I
the
haven't said
issue
anything.
where the controversy is surrounded not what the Quran explicitly states. It doesn't say there's no woman contributing factor, but because it stays silent on a specific issue, therefore you have came to this conclusion based on your interpretation that it's denying the existence of it. Let's move on if that's okay, if that's agreeable
Let
with
me
what we're
clarify.
Yeah.
Surah 96, he created man from a clinging form. So all we have is a clinging form. Then Surah 53, it said that he himself created the two sexes, male and female, from an ejected drop of sperm, no mention of an egg. And then
That's true.
Surah
That's right.
80,
You shouldn't mention the egg.
And
If the Quran mentioned the egg, it would be wrong. It has no role in the male and female. So that was a good point it made there.
and Surah 80, from what thing, singular, does God create him? He creates him from a droplet, a single droplet. He proportions him. Note that that's explicit there too. Then Surah 75, was he not a drop of spilt out sperm, which became a clinging form? So the sperm becomes another thing, right? Didn't mesh with something else. It became another thing all on its own, which God shaped in proportion, fashioning from it the two sexes. Then Surah 77, did we not make you from an underrated fluid, which we housed in a safe lodging for a determined period? Underrated fluid, again, explicitly referring to sperm. So 5 times the Quran says you are made from sperm. It never mentions that the sperm mixed with anything. It doesn't imply in any sense that there was any other thing there, nor does some of the verbiage allow that there could be another component in here. That is factually false.
So nothing, all of what you're pointing out here is that the Quran is remaining silent on the woman's contributing factor.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that. It's saying that we are made from this one thing, a drop and no other thing. And it actually implies that there is no other thing involved in one of the verses when it's either phrased as just a sperm in one interpretation.
You're breaking up.
The other verse, the other
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Thing,
I didn't hear you.
Singular. Surah 80, verse 18. From what?
Aaron, I'm sorry, Aron. Barad, is he breaking up? Because I didn't hear that last part.
He's breaking up.
Oh, am I?
You're breaking up.
You were breaking up.
Yeah, I just saw my router was popping in and out a little bit. My apologies.
No problem. Surah 18.
I think we all agree. I think we all agree on this, but I think the issue here is the way you interpret it. You see, and I think there's two fallacies which are at play here. The number one, according to my opinion, my opinion is there's an intention fallacy where you're trying to judge the intention of the author, and you think like, I know what his intention is. Number one. Second is because something is not mentioned, it's denying the existence of it. That we cannot, I think, agree.
What it actually is that the verbiage, if God wrote this, which of course I don't believe because that's not possible, but if God wrote that, then God would be, or whoever wrote it, if they had divine knowledge, then they are being misleading because they know that they would have to know that there's this other thing involved, and they make no mention of that. They give every indication that it is only this one thing, and they don't even allow that it could be something else. There's no hint that it could be something else. So it is misleading.
Let's move on to the next point, because I think what's happening here is you're campaigning for the argument of silence and why you should believe in the argument of silence.
I'm definitely not. I don't care about the argument from silence. We are doing something that is misleading by omission.
Let me ask you a question.
Let me give you another
fault for that.
Has any Muslim?
Let me give you another
point of view. People who read the Quran. Let me address him, and then I can address you. You see, even when we go to the scholars, and we look at the classical writings of how the Quran was interpreted, how come we don't find, at least not what I find, anybody in there making this claim that they read this verse and they came to the conclusion the woman has no contributing factor at all to who you are just because the sperm was mentioned? When we look at Islamic history, I don't find very many people, actually anybody, who actually has ever come to this conclusion but you guys.
Yeah,
You
well,
think there's something wrong
okay.
there?
that's a good point.
Let-
The thing that I brought up earlier about the proof of why the serpent in the garden could not have been Satan,
Mhm.
that's undeniable. The scriptures in the Bible, right? The Bible is explicit on that. It can't be, because it's not. He shows up later chronologically, and he's not crawling on his belly all the rest of his days. He's walking around, right? So it's not possible for this. But how many Christians have read that and remained Christian and still didn't believe that? I mean, you don't get a lot of Christians admitting, hey, the Bible's wrong. You know why? Because when people believe in a book, they're going to really willfully believe in that book, and they're not going to point out errors in that book. That's
And
why.
I forgot to mention something about the woman's contributing factor that actually is mentioned in the Hadith.
Well, where is it?
We don't care.
It's not in the Quran.
It's not
not
in the
in the Quran.
Quran.
So here's my
We don't
point.
care.
That's a good point. Yes, but what I wanted to show you is that the presupposition, I guess the conclusion you're making, first of all, we know is not true. The issue is here that you thought that. Okay, we know from history that what you're saying is basically not true, in the sense like you've basically
not true. What is it?
Yeah, you have concluded that Muhammad, or you believe Muhammad wrote the Quran, that he was ignorant of the woman's contributing factor to who we are.
Yeah, and what I actually said was that if it had been written by a god, then that god would be at fault for having written something that was misleading, and he would have known that was misleading because he knew about the other element. And he implied in every line referring to this that it is just a sperm and there's nothing else. There's no implication that it could be anything else. There's no hint that it might be a sperm mixed with something else. So that omission becomes a fault of the omniscient being who wrote it.
That's your interpretation. I mean, you're welcome to your personal interpretation.
No.
But I don't hold that.
That's not. Remember,
okay, so it is
we
a fact
know
that nowhere in the Quran does it clarify this. Nowhere in the Quran does it say that the woman also contributes some half of the genetic material or an egg.
Because the Quran is not a book of what we call, is not a book which is here to teach you science. It's a book of signs, and there's a difference.
The answer to the yes or no question is that nowhere in the Quran does the Quran clarify this misleading interpretation.
And to add to just a second, let me add this to the point. Remember when we were discussing Moses and his crossing of the seas in Surah 7, right? And I mentioned that he mentions the other details somewhere else later in the Quran. We haven't gotten there yet. So I'm aware of the silence issue, but when you have repeated, consistent mentions of only the sperm and nothing else added to it ever in the Quran, then you have a problem. It's not a silence, it's an ignorance. God does not know.
Let's move on, because I think we have said all that we possibly could.
Either
you guys,
written by
we need to
Muhammad
move on.
and he didn't know that there was an egg, or it was written by God and he knew that this would be misleading.
But see, that's what I'm trying to explain to you before I was cut off. So when you said either this was written by Muhammad and he didn't know the female contributing factor, we know from history that's not true, because Muhammad did mention in a hadith about the male and the female contributing factor to who you are going to be. So that I can share with you at another time.
Okay.
Or if you like, I can share with you now.
And the reason why we don't hold the hadith up to the same standard that we hold the Quran is that it is collected by people 100 years, maybe hundreds of years later. We don't know when this information was added to the body of the hadith. Maybe 300 years later, somebody figured out the role of the women and made up a hadith for it, and there would be no way you can tell the difference. So let's move.
What you guys are doing at this point is that you are trying to basically kind of convince people, or trying to campaign for why they should embrace your interpretation of the Quran, and that's not going to get us anywhere.
I stated a fact about the Quran.
Okay, and we've said all that we could possibly say on this. And you know what my position is. Just because the Quran doesn't state something doesn't mean it negates it, and that's the way 1 billion Muslims have always viewed the Quran, and going back in history.
The fact remains that this misleading line is repeated a half a dozen times with no clarification.
I don't think it's misleading at all. That's your interpretation. I think it's an awesome verse.
Definitely misleading.
I think it's a very good point. He's showing that from the sperm drop, look where you are and what you are today. That was the only intent behind the verse. So this goes back to the intention fallacy. You are saying the intention here is to teach science and the way the
fact is, it does not correct that implication. It repeats the 1/2 contribution, stating in the verbiage that doesn't even allow that there's another thing, that what thing, individual singular thing, is man-made. What thing did he make him from? A drop of sperm. That's it.
Let's move on to the next point. Let's move on to the next alleged scientific error.
Okay. The next confirmed scientific error is that sperm comes from the backbone and ribs.
Okay.
This is in Surah 90, looking at verses 6 and 7.
Okay, so here's what I'd like for you to do. I'd like you to basically take that verse, which you're talking about, into a kebab shop, maybe, or even like a Pakistani restaurant or something like that. And when the waiter comes to your table, say, "Give me that," for the word which you think is sperm. What's going to happen is he's going to go around the corner. He's going to come back and hand you a glass of water, because the word sperm is not found in that text. It's water, that he created you from mat. And that word mat is still used today. In fact, this is in the common Arabic. Like if you want to go and say, "Hey, I need some water," just take that verse and see what happens. That's my experiment for everybody here. It's what was chapter 98, verse 6.
What is the translation there? And do I have the right reference here? Because I copied this from his.
Okay. Can I share my desktop by any chance?
Okay.
Okay, so let's do this one here.
I'm trying to make sure I got the right reference, because
I don't think it's Surah 90. I'm just reading it here.
I'm thinking it might not be Surah 90.
Well, I'll give you the right surah, not right one. Okay, and we're going to look at my desktop, and I'm going to kind of prove to you what I'm talking about here. Okay, so let's first get the verse. The verse is let's see, sperm. It is chapter. Where are you, buddy? What verse did you give us? 98 verse 6 or something?
I had it written down here as Surah 90, but I may have copied this down wrong.
I'll get it for you. Sperm.
He created from spurting fluid, and that's in brackets semen.
Mm-hmm.
Then he emerges from between the backbone and the breastbone.
Backbone.
Yeah, so it's not talking about water. It's talking about he is created from.
Okay. The backbone and ribs, and that is Surah 86 verse 7, I believe. 86:7. Let me get it in front of me.
Well, I had the wrong chapter in here. My apologies.
86 verse 7. Surah. Let me put that in here. Okay, Surah, and it says over here.
So let man observe from what he was created. He was created from a fluid, ejected, emerging from between the backbone and ribs, clarifying that we are definitely not talking about water. We are definitely talking about the sperm that was referenced before.
How much silence can you handle? But that's the question. Because it consistently stays silent about, the woman doesn't have a contributing factor in this.
Yep, this is a 7th repeat that the only component from which we are made is semen. And now it's further complicated by saying that semen comes from the backbone and ribs, which we know is not true.
Okay, well, let's first see if it's really there. I'm trying to get a little reference in front of you. Let's see if I can share my desktop here. Just give me 1 second here. So as I said, the word semen is actually nowhere to be found in the verse. It's actually what it's talking about. It's talking about water.
Okay, just let me clarify a point here.
It clarifies here that it's not talking about water. It says in verse 5, it begins, so let man observe from what he was created. He was created from a fluid, ejected. Notice a singular fluid. He was created from a singular fluid, ejected. So we're talking about sperm, not eggs. There is no allowance that there could be an egg involved. Emerging from between the backbone and ribs. Definitely not water. We do not eject water, and we've already got a half a dozen other references from elsewhere in the Quran that say that he was created from semen. So we clearly know we are definitely talking about semen and not water.
So the word for semen in Arabic is many. That's the word for semen in Arabic. So when you look in there, it does not say many in there.
Okay, it's often used as water, as liquid, as despicable liquid, semen.
Okay.
All these words are talking about the same thing. There is no point in making the argument like which word exactly he used. He talks about semen. Everybody knows that. That's what he's talking about. I mean, what else could it be?
Okay. So
If
the
it's
word, you do agree, the word many is not in there.
no, it's not in there, but it's liquid
Okay.
and fine. I understand it when I
Okay, so
read
the word
this.
sperm is not in the Quran.
It,
Okay.
it never occurred to me throughout my life when I read this verse that it wasn't semen.
Okay. That's
Okay.
And
your
it can't be not semen here, because we've
okay.
already got clarification that the one and only thing from which man is made, from a half a dozen other references in the Quran, is that we are made from semen. And here it specifies that we are made from a fluid that is ejected, and this is the one and only thing that man is made from. So clearly it's got to be talking about the same thing, because otherwise it's contradicting itself. Now, which is it doing? Is
But
it talking about
what is
sperm,
it?
or is it contradicting itself?
Yeah, well, is it better if it's not even semen?
Mm-hmm.
No, it doesn't
So
make it better.
okay, so it says, I mean, the word, yeah, because I mean, you do confirm with me. I mean, we're looking at the, we do agree this is water it's talking about here, right?
It's semen,
we
yeah.
don't.
It's a
Wait,
liquid and it's semen.
Matt is still used today. We still use
Okay.
that word.
I don't care how they misuse it today. In the context of what this is saying, this is clarifying that the fluid that they're talking about is not water. It's clearly semen. It's either
Everybody understands
like
that.
the other half dozen references said that men are
Okay.
created from semen, like this reference is saying that men is created from, or it's contradicting itself. So is the Quran contradicting itself, or is it being consistent and still describing semen? Which is it?
Okay, that's a lot for me to take in. If I don't answer
It's
all of
one of
that.
two things. The Quran is either wrong about it being, it's talking about semen and giving the wrong location for where it comes, or it's contradicting itself. In either case, it's
Okay,
wrong.
let's first talk about what the Quran, what is actually, we all agree that in this verse, many, which is a word for semen, that's not in the Quran. I mean, in this chapter 8.
Do we also agree that it says in verse 5, so let man observe from what he is created? The next verse, he was created from a fluid, ejected.
Water.
He was created from, does it specify that it's water?
Yeah. It's the same word for water. You can
It
use
uses
it.
the water, but I repeat again, in this case, it means semen, because if
Water
it
means
didn't,
semen?
in this case,
Okay,
it
so what he's
has to
saying, what
mean
Nadir
that,
is saying, is that the Quran is contradicting itself.
or it's even
That's a different
wronger.
issue. That's a different issue. We can talk about
Previous
that.
half dozen references that said that we were made out of semen, but now the Quran is contradicting itself and saying that we are made out of water.
Okay.
Let's
okay,
take it. If you take the literal water,
yes, it's water.
if you take the literal water, then the Quran is even wronger.
Okay.
Okay?
So
It's even
let's
wronger
now deal
because
with
it's
the
not
issue of
water,
contradiction.
it is semen. If you want
Okay.
to have it that way, let's have it that way. But then it's not even semen. Then what the heck is he talking about?
Okay.
And-
So
and
we all agree.
Quran's
We all
wrong.
agree. Semen is not in this verse. Okay. So the Quran
No,
does
I
not
agree
say
that semen is implied in this verse.
implied. There you go. That's your own
Yeah.
interpretation.
Yeah,
The
because
text of the Quran
either
doesn't
that
say
or the
that.
Quran contradicts itself.
see-
Now, if you want to argue that the Quran is contradicting itself, then you are
Let's
admitting that
do
the
it.
Quran is
I
wrong.
will argue that. I will. Let's do that one.
Okay, so in the previous half a dozen verses, it was implying semen, was it not?
Was
Yeah, I
it?
talked about semen. Yeah. So
It was.
Yeah, it talked
Was the
about
word
it.
semen
the
used?
male and the female was from
Was
the
the word
semen. Yes.
semen used in any of those previous verses?
I think he cut out.
You're broken up.
Yeah.
Aron, you broke up. I
Yeah,
didn't
I'm
hear
sorry.
you.
You
I think it
broke
was
up.
you this time. I know it was me last time. I apologize, but it was you this time.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
You're back.
Okay, guys. So I think, see, here's the thing. I think we are, in a sense, we are agreeing more than we are disagreeing. You see, what I would like to show you is a double standard here, which is wrong. The first thing is when it's my turn to show scientific miracles in the Quran, if it didn't explicitly state that, then you will criticize me and you'll say, no, you're wrong. And I thought, oh no, but it implies it. It implies it, you know.
So,
and
so in the previous 6,
then you will then turn around and accuse me of reading into the Quran what is not there.
I don't use logical fallacies, and double standard is certainly not one I apply.
We
I
are-
know that you do, because
Yes.
the standard that I have to abide by is that when something is impossible, that's the thing that proves it wrong. You have a different standard. You're using a double standard because you can then claim a miracle from the special pleading fallacy, which is what allows you to do that. But I don't use fallacies. So we're going to use the one standard. And by that one standard we both have to apply to, does it specify the word for semen in any of the previous half dozen references that we read before this one?
Did you ask, does it specify semen in all those other verses?
In any of them?
Yes.
It was semen there. In the verses which you quoted from before, that the male and the female is from the sperm, which is scientifically
What kind
correct.
of a sperm? What's the word being used? Let's see.
But now let's talk about 86, guys. I think let me, so
Well,
we all agree.
Let's see.
Guys.
Let's see. 53 verses 46 uses nutfa.
The drop.
What is nutfa?
Just a drop of what? Solid iron?
How do we know that it's semen? Not an interpretation, but how do we know that it's semen?
A drop of
Surah
what?
86? In Surah 86?
Yeah.
53. Let's go 86.
Wait a second. We're jumping all over the place. We're still dealing with
It's
Surah
all
86.
over the place. It is all over the place. He uses different words to describe semen. You're only stuck on,
That's
on,
your
on water.
interpretation.
You're
Okay, that's
only
your
you're
interpretation.
only-
Richard.
We know that in 96 it was talking about a clinging form, so we know that it didn't use the word specific for semen there.
no
We
semen.
don't need to visit that one again.
Okay,
In
let's
Surah
go to 83.
53,
Okay.
And all the way you were okay with it to be any other word that we interpret and understand as semen, and when we come to water, suddenly you have a problem with it.
Well, semen was specifically, well, let me go. I can't remember what verse it was in the rest. On the verses.
45.
Now, can I speak, guys? Okay, so the issue here is why I'm not letting you off the hook here is because the word
I'm
in
not on the
chapter
hook.
80.
I'm not the one on the hook. You are definitely the one on the hook. Don't get confused.
Okay, let's not interrupt each other. Let me finish. The word which is used in chapter number 86, verse 7 is not sperm. It's the same word which you can use if you go to any restaurant and you point to this and say, hey, I want this. They're going to hand you a glass of water because everybody, even today, everyone sees that as water. So the word sperm is nowhere to be found in there. But some people have put their own interpretation and turned water into sperm. And that's what we're dealing with here.
So let's take a look, if you would, please. Surah 53, verse 46.
53:46. Okay, let's go there.
Now, please tell me what that word means.
So it says from a drop when it is emitted. So
from a drop. Doesn't say what a drop of what?
So
a drop of
so the word sperm is not there.
Well, so it is sperm drop. Yeah. The word, so basically the word sperm is there, but it's being turned into
how?
Where is it? There. What is the word for sperm?
Where is it?
Tumna, which is the very last word in 46.
Tumna,
which is emitted, not many. Okay.
Let me. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm going to hold you at the standard on the water, I'm going to hold you at the standard on this one.
So,
well, this is different. This does not say water. This actually says sperm.
Does it actually say sperm?
No, it says emitting some sort of a liquid because you can only, I mean, you can't have a drop of iron. That would be difficult.
Well, it'd be painful.
For sure.
Well, can we do this, guys? Maybe we could do this. Can you just bring up the verses where it explicitly states or denies something rather than, why didn't it say that?
One that we're looking for right now. This is the one where you said the word sperm is there. And what I'm hearing, and I wish I had more Arabic speakers on the show at this moment, but what I'm hearing is that the word sperm is not there, but a word that implies an unidentified fluid is what is actually there. And that
no, it does say sperm.
That because
it does say sperm.
It does say sperm. And what is the word for sperm?
Tumna.
Tumna. TU.
No,
so
no,
the
no.
word, okay, so it's like this.
The word for
The
sperm
word
is
for
just many.
It's what?
many,
Like
but then
many.
the verb of emitting it is tumna, right?
Which means emitting. So it doesn't have to be sperm. Do I have a feeling that God creates people from not sperm either?
So
Is
I
that
mean,
what you're going for?
either we're talking about sperm in every one of these verses, or we're
Or
talking
we're not.
we're not
Or we're
emitted,
not.
not emitted from. So the verse that you in the one we're talking about right now, what was it? Surah 53. You said that it was definitely sperm, even though it just says emitted fluid. So you're interpreting that it means sperm.
Based
That's
on
an
my
interesting
limited
concept.
understanding of Arabic, it took the word sperm and it turned it into a verb. So, like for example, in English, like in Arabic, you will say sperming, and that's what it's doing over here. When it's sperming, that's the way it's being. Uh, that's my understanding. So the word sperm is there, but it's being used as a verb.
Well, that's an interesting verb. I can see a whole lot of jokes being made about that.
That's the way Arabic is. You know,
Oh, I appreciate that.
yeah.
My wife was trained in Arabic. I feel kind of envious of her, especially at this moment.
we need Ghada right now.
Yeah, we do. She told me last night she was very enthusiastic about coming on the show, and I understand that Nadir even liked her because he sent me a message saying that she was a keeper. That was very nice, and she was. I know she was excited to be on here, and then she sent me a message yesterday that something sudden had come up, and she apologized that she couldn't make it today. She hopes to be here on our next gathering, whenever that is.
I'll make a screenshot of it, and you can just confirm what I just told you. But I'm pretty sure what I'm saying is right.
Okay.
So going back to the word about sperm being produced in the backbone and the ribs, that's a non-issue. That's a non-issue. It's not in the Quran.
What was the screenshot?
I'm going to send you a screenshot of Surah 53 verse 46.
I'm on the same webpage that you are.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you just ask her about that, and I'm pretty sure she'll confirm.
Okay, we were on Quran.com, right?
Yeah, Quran 53. Yes, correct.
Okay, so now we're on 53. Let me jump over to 53. And I apologize for anybody watching how boring it is that we're looking up scriptural references, but
super interesting.
Yeah,
we are
necessary.
arguing about what water is and what isn't.
And what verse were we at? I'm on 53 now.
53:46.
I mean, if we agree that there is some sort of a liquid emitted by men to make babies happen, we're going to have to agree that it's going to be semen and not something else.
Yeah, it says here from a sperm drop when it is emitted.
I don't know.
Yep. Tumna. So, but going back to 86, we have to agree that the words now it did not use the word tumna. It didn't use the word many.
No, but what is
the word water?
Okay, so
why did it use?
I just want to clarify. Let me make sure I understand you. When we were talking about Surah 96, that was created from a clinging form, do we agree? Are we collectively interpreting that to be sperm?
That's an interpretation that some people have.
Is it your interpretation?
So
No.
all the other ones are also interpretations then.
Do you interpret Surah 96 verse 2 to say that man is created from a clinging form? Is it referring to sperm?
Surah 96 verse 2?
Yes.
No, because that's alaka. That's not, sperm is not being used there.
But it says we were created with this clinging form, and you're saying that clinging form is not sperm.
When it talks about Surah 96 verse 2, it's alaka, which is not sperm. Correct.
Okay,
that's not sperm, then what is it?
Something which is clinging. Something which is clinging.
Okay.
So what is it?
Well,
so in Surah 75, verses 38 or 37 and 38, what does it say there?
75 verses, what is it?
37 and 38.
37, 38. Okay. 37. Okay, 37 is a huge one. Yeah. Okay. Wait. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Let me get there real quick. 75.
So the English translation reads that was he not just a drop of spilled out sperm, which became a clinging form.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see what it. Okay, so here it says, Alam, meaning was he not? Yeah, nutfatin mean many. Yes, sperm is used here. Many. There you go. And that what I just told you inside chapter 53, where I talked to you about sperming, that's confirmed
Okay,
because
so
I'm looking at the
38,
verb. Yeah.
verse
So
38.
basically, this is 38, 37 says sperm. 38 says, then from something which clings.
Yeah. So is that not the same thing that we were talking about before? Is the Quran saying it says we're created out of something? Is it saying that we're saying that we were created out of sperm in Surah 75 and also out of sperm in the previous Surah? Also in
Yeah. It says over
both
here.
places.
Up, you broke up
Yeah,
there,
Aaron is broke up again.
Aaron.
I don't think he can even see us.
Yeah, I think he's out.
Hello,
Oh, here he is.
you're back? Are you
Oh,
back?
you're back? Yeah, we didn't
Okay,
hear you. You
cool.
broke up.
Yeah, my router says that everything's fine. I apologize. Anyway, in Surah 96, it says we were created from a clinging form, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in Surah 53, it says there we were created by sperm. Is that a contradiction?
No.
No. So they're both talking about sperm.
I'm sorry. Can you, how does that contradict? You explain that to me.
Well,
Because
if it's
you
a
said
clinging,
it's
if we were
not.
created out of a clinging form in one verse, and then the other verse it says we were created out of sperm, it would
But
not
it
be a
said
contradiction
then.
if they're
It said you're created from sperm. Then we made you into something which clings. That's what it says.
okay. So we were created out of a clinging form, and then it says in the next verse that we were created out of spilt out sperm, which became a clinging form. So the first thing it is sperm.
So
Right.
yeah, so it says over here. It starts with chapter 75, verse 37. It says, had he been a sperm from it says over here, uh alam yaku like you were like from a drop emitted from a sperm drop, that you were basically, what is this? I don't know what this
Okay.
one word means.
So
That
in
he was
Surah,
from a sperm drop, and then from something which clings. Thumma, meaning then he became something which clings, and then we fashioned him. So he went from sperm drop, we came from something from a sperm into something which clinged.
okay, so the sperm turns into a clinging form. It's
Yes.
an emitted fluid that becomes a clinging form.
Yes.
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 Okay. So in the earlier surah, what was it? 96.
Well, it doesn't. It just said that first you were you were a sperm, then he was clinging.
Okay. So
So that's what it
in
says.
surah 96, the clinging form is referring to what sperm became, right?
We're talking about 75. So
Right.
I was
And
just
I'm
giving 75,
comparing
yeah.
all these different verses because, of course, we wouldn't expect that the Quran is going to contradict itself. So if
Mhm.
it says that we were created from a clinging form in Surah 96, and in Surah 53 it says we were created from sperm, which became a clinging form, then 53 or excuse me, 75 and 96 are both talking about sperm becoming a clinging form. Yes.
Okay, 75, 37 through he not been a sperm emitted, then he was clinging, and 96 says that he was 96 verse 2 said he was from a clinging something, which was alaka. He came from alaka,
Okay. So are they
and
talking about
so
the same thing,
yeah,
or is it
clinging,
contradicting
clinging.
it?
No, how is this contradicting?
It would be contradicting if the clinging form is something that if in one surah it says the sperm became a clinging form and that's what we were created from, but in surah what is it 96 it says the clinging form was something else, then it would be a contradiction. But if they're both talking about the sperm becoming the clinging form, then it's not a contradiction. You understand?
Yes, and that's what it said.
Okay,
But
so it's a
still, even
sperm
if
in
it
both
didn't,
verses, so that we understand
uh,
that it is a sperm that becomes a clinging form in Surah 96 as well as Surah 75. Yes?
yes, I believe so. I
Okay.
think,
So
yeah.
then in Surah 53, he himself created
Mhm.
the sexes male and female from an ejected drop of sperm. We're still talking about sperm, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then in Surah 80, from what thing, individual thing, does God create him? He creates him from a droplet. Are we still talking about sperm?
Surah 80. What was the verse?
Verse 19.
Surah 80, verse 19. Let me get there. In 19, it says, from what substance did he create him? From a drop. It didn't say sperm there. It just said from a drop.
Okay,
From
but,
nutfatan.
all right. So
Yeah.
is it still talking about sperm, or is it contradicting itself now?
Well, because sperm wasn't mentioned here, I guess we could maybe make the interpretation that it's talking about the sperm.
Well, the only choice then would be to say that it's contradicting itself. If it says everywhere else that man was created from a sperm that then became a clinging form, if in Surah 80 it suddenly talk about something else, that would be a contradiction. Agreed?
No, because, well, first of all, I would assume it's talking about a sperm, but it could never be a contradiction because we could ask, okay, how did you bake the cake? Well, I made it from eggs. Okay, well, and then you can come back and say, well, I made it from flour and I used sugar. So these are not contradictions. There's no way, it does not violate the law of non-contradiction. No. Violating the law of non-contradiction would be something like what we see in the Bible where it says, and Jesus was crucified at the 3rd hour. Then another verse says Jesus was crucified at the 6th hour. You cannot reconcile it. You cannot be both third and
So
sixth.
are people created from sperm or from water?
Well, is there any water in sperm?
Is that it?
That's my question.
Is that the tip of the argument then?
What I would say is whether water was used in the creation of human beings, this is something we
are 1980.
We have two
would not
ingredients
try
in this
to-
case. One of them is not mentioned in the Quran.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry, what's that?
one is repeatedly. So we have all these other verses that we've talked about in which this word sperm is not always used, but it is definitely always implied. And the only possible interpretation is that they're talking about sperm. Right?
Well, when
Because
it says a
that
drop,
emitted fluid is also what is determining our gender.
well, first of all, water is a big portion of water, I believe, is sperm. So it's like trying to show that sperm and water somehow contradict. That's never going to work.
Well,
because
then you can't say that it's
yeah.
you can't say that the verse we're talking about now is referring to water because water doesn't come from there.
86.
We have-
So 86.
86% of our entire body is water. So you
Okay.
can't identify that it comes from that one location. We're talking about something special there, not what comes out of our salivatory glands.
Yeah, because 90% of
I know-
alcohol is water,
Okay.
yet you still don't drink it.
So I think what we can agree is, well, I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is where exactly is the contradiction here?
The
Well, you
contradiction
brought
is
it up.
that in
You
Surah
made one.
86, it says in my English translation that man is created from a spurting fluid, which we agree that in every other reference is talking about semen. And indeed, the translation that I have has the word semen in brackets. Now, we know that if the Quran is consistent in not contradicting itself, then it must be talking about this spurting fluid, which cannot be water, obviously. We don't spurt water, at least not from that location. We might urinate or we might salivate and a number of other things, but we're not spurting liquid from between the backbone and the breastbone. So
Okay.
we're not spurting water.
We don't know that. Okay, look,
We
let's
do
talk
know
about where.
that.
Hold on. Let
Nobody
me-
spurts
now
water
let me-
from the backbone and breastbone.
Okay, it doesn't. Okay, so what the verb says, it says emitted. So in fact, when we go back to chapter number 86, I'm sorry.
Have you ever seen anyone emit water from their backbone and breastbone? Or from between their backbone and breastbone?
This was Surah 86, verse 7, right?
6 and 7, yes.
Okay, let me
He is
just get it
created from a
so we
spurting
can-
fluid.
Yeah, so the verse says emitted, and it's not the word spurting. Really, isn't there? That's more of a
Is it the same word
translation.
for?
Yeah.
For
So there is no way
sperming?
you can prove or disprove this. That when the human being was created, when he was just when the sperm meets the egg or something like that, that no water was used. It is impossible to
But we're
prove or
not talking
disprove
about
what's being
water.
written here.
This is specifying that we're not talking about water because, and then he emerges from between the backbone and breastbone.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Yes.
Nope.
Emerging from, okay, so when we,
He's
I guess
created from a spurting fluid, then he emerges from the backbone and the breastbone. And what does your translation say?
It said he was created from a fluid, which is water, ejected, Dafik, emerging from between the
Why does it
backbone
say
and the rib.
water in that translation? Why
What's
is
that?
the spurting fluid semen everywhere else?
Well, here, let me do
Yeah,
this.
I think the Quran is just using the word water for semen in this case.
Okay, that's your
I
interpretation.
don't know what the hang up on this is for. I
I don't know.
can't see two imams disagreeing on this. And
Okay.
really, we stopped here. There is no point in stopping here. That water, that emerging water in verse 6, that's semen.
Okay, that's your interpretation. So if you
What
interpret it
other
that
possible
way,
interpretation could there be? That the Quran is contradicting itself?
no, I think it's just using water.
So just
Yeah.
water. So in this
Water means
case,
water.
So are we made from water?
okay, then in this case, human beings are created from water.
Except every other reference where it says we're created from sperm.
Then the Quran contradicted itself. Bang,
Well,
right there.
okay. So because it says one reference, it says sperm. One reference says it's water. Therefore, it's a contradiction. Is that what you're saying?
Of course it is. He's all over the
Okay.
place.
Yeah, sure.
Then it is
Let's
all
move
over
on
the
to the
place.
next one.
Because
Yeah,
if
I'm not even gonna address
we
that.
take this water for sperm, then it's
Let's
okay.
move on to the
Everything
next
is
one.
in line.
Okay.
Let's get the
What's
next
the
one.
next
I'm not ready
scientific
to
error?
move on from the next one because
Mhm.
this isn't all I've got there on this
Okay.
one. Now, the footnotes from Adel Halim so it makes the excuse that we come from the mother's womb, which is closer to the indicated area, but still outside of it. So at no point do we emerge from between the backbone and breastbone. It's factually false whether it's talking about sperm or water. It's still wrong either way.
So you're saying the scientific error is that water is never used in the creation of man? Is that what you're
No, I'm
saying?
saying that the scientific error is that we, as embryos, never emerge from between the backbone and the breastbone.
Oh, yeah. If the Quran said that the embryo emerges from the backbone and the rib, then it would be wrong. But that's not what the
Yeah, but
Quran
it
says.
doesn't. It says that we were spurting fluid, which is implied semen.
There's that implied word that
Yeah,
whenever you say
the same
implied,
implication that we
that-
looked
okay,
at all of the others too.
okay.
You said
See,
you found the
whenever
word
you,
sperm for 1 out of 6. Every other one was a fluid or a liquid or something like that, which we can only interpret to be, and that you interpret to be sperm.
when
So
it's
we have the exact
specifically
same
stated, no, I
thing.
don't interpret. See, I'm not interpreting. When it's specifically stated sperm, then I say sperm. But if it's not there, then I'm not going to say it.
But
And so
when it
in
didn't
chapter
say that,
86,
when it
but
didn't specifically say sperm,
let
but
me,
implied that it had determined our gender, you had to interpret it as sperm, and you agreed that you interpreted it as sperm. This is a recorded call, remember?
right. Which verse did I interpret it as? Oh, when the word sperm was not there inside, it just said from a drop.
Yet the interpretation was that it determined our gender. So
When the
interpreted
sperm is not there, when the word sperm is not there, you can make assumptions on the text, and that's what I could do sometimes. But at the same time, I'll readily admit that the Quran doesn't exactly state it in there, but I just made that assumption. So
Okay,
I
so
think,
you
yeah,
interpreted that when the interpretation already there from you is that it's determining our gender, then you interpret that fluid not specified as being sperm. You interpret
that was sperm because that was actually written that the male and the female come from the sperm. There's no way you can get around that. So it's explicitly
There's no way you can
stated.
get around this either. It's
No?
the same thing.
Right.
It's the
There's
same
no way you can
interpretation.
get around chapter 86 explicitly stating it was water. You can't get around that.
This was where Abdel Halim says that the excuse that we came from the mother, and he specified that we're talking about semen. So in his
No,
translation,
that's
he put
okay.
in
That's
brackets.
his interpretation, but that's
Yes,
not
granted,
what the
and it's
text.
the same interpretation that you yourself used in another
Okay.
verse for the same kind of reason. And
Okay.
then he was
No,
arguing
I
that
did
it's
not
actually
use-
the
no, I did not
embryo,
do that.
and he was
Okay.
arguing that it was the embryo, that the clinging
So
form.
let's
sperm
agree
comes.
let's agree on this. We can all agree on this, that if you want to interpret this verse to mean sperm, if that's your interpretation, then perhaps you can see some conflict with science. But the text of the Quran doesn't say sperm, it says water.
Okay,
Now,
then let's
can we move
be
on to the
very
next
clear.
point?
If it means sperm, then the Quran is wrong here. If it means water, and it's talking about water that's coming that is emitting or spurting from between the backbone and breastbone, then it's wrong here. If it means
show me a
embryo,
scientific
then
reference.
the Quran is wrong here.
Wait a second.
Give me an interpretation where the Quran is not wrong here.
Wait a second. I want to see a reference from you, from an embryologist, that when the human being is created, no drop of H2O has ever emitted from this place. Can you please show me that reference?
From between the backbone and breastbone.
Okay.
Seriously?
You have no scientific reference for that.
Nadir,
we don't
trust
there,
me.
there is no scientific reference for anybody spurting fluid from between the backbone and breastbone.
Here's my point. No scientist will ever waste his time trying to prove or disprove something like this. They'll just say, okay, whatever, just move on.
You're right. They'll all say, no, that's not where it comes from.
Can you show it to me where they would actually say that?
If it was talking about water,
where is that?
If it's talking about spurting water, it wouldn't be talking about that location.
Did you know, Aron, did you know that a lot of embryologists have talked about this verse?
Yes, I've talked to an embryologist on these verses.
Okay, what were their names and what did they say?
P.Z. Myers.
Is he an embryologist?
Yes.
You don't want to bring an embryologist
P.Z. Myers.
here.
Okay, let me see if that's true. P.Z. Myers.
I'll prove it's true in just a minute because he's on the.
I just Googled his name.
I was about to bring up.
He's a biologist, and I don't see anything about him being an embryologist.
Developmental biologist. And the specificity there is that he's an embryologist.
Okay, let me see. Can you show me a reference for that?
Yes, I can. I can show you a video of it where he declares himself such.
Okay.
And if you like
how his theories can be reconciled. Okay, it looks like but he's not. Oh, he's a biologist guy. He's not like, he doesn't like really deal with human embryology, right? Like for us.
But he deals with embryology of the various types, not just us.
Do you got an embryo? Like here's my point. It looks like he just kind of dabbled in a lot of different type of topics under biology from what I'm looking at his wiki page.
How no true Scotsman do we need to get?
Okay, here's the thing. Here's my point. Many embryologists, people like Dr. Keith Moore, who is one of the...
Keith Moore is also coming up in my next example because Keith Moore was paid off to make a misstatement in one of the apologetics for the
So he was paid off. Do you got evidence for that?
Yeah, because what he said was wrong.
No, but you got evidence he was paid off?
Well, he was paid by... He was paid to promote the Quran. Yeah, I think actually the rationalizer.
To actually submit false information. Now, here's
the rationalizer was the one that interviewed him on his show, where he admitted that
he never interviewed Keith Moore. No,
I thought that was the rationalizer did that.
But here's the thing. I mean, Keith Moore is just one of the embryologists. There are many embryologists, not just Keith Moore, who have come out, looked at our verses, and they were very amazed with what the Quran and how the Quran describes embryology.
So it sounds like we're going to get into the next one kind of prematurely. Yes. So I just want to finish my last note on this point was that, semen, it was implying that semen emerges from the chest cavity, from the organs of the abdomen, not from the testes, which of course is wrong. If it says that it's water, well, then that's wrong too, because we might be able to make an argument coming from the bladder or the salivatory glands or what have you, but you're not going to be able to argue that it's water spurting from between the chest cavity and the backbone. That's still wrong. And if it's interpreting it as the embryo, then that doesn't come from that location either, so that's still wrong. It doesn't matter what it's interpreting it as, it's still wrong. So
you produce no scientific references showing water was never used in the creation of man from this area. Where is your
reference? From between the backbone and the breastbone? Definitely not.
Okay, if you don't want to show any scientific reference, you can even talk to PZ or whoever.
People don't spurt water from between the backbone and the breastbone.
Where is
for a location for water? You would first look to the salivatory glands or the.
You see, Aron, you are not an embryologist. I'm not an embryologist. When you make claims of science like this, you have to bring some kind of reference from a book or something like this.
Right.
This is not something you can prove or disprove.
Since we know, even non-biologists know, that people do not spurt water from between the backbone and the breastbone.
That's your opinion. We don't know.
That's not an opinion.
Do not spurt water from between the backbone and the breastbone. That's absurd.
I don't have to be a biologist to know that, actually.
Yeah,
I really don't.
Spurt water from between the backbone and the breastbone. It just doesn't happen.
Next point. Our friends, you have no reference for what you're saying. It's just kind of ridiculous and make fun.
Keith Moore's claim refuted that the Quran says that flesh forms after bones. And this is a reference to Surah 23, verse 14. When we made the sperm drop into a clinging clot, once again clarifying that the clinging clot is indeed a sperm, and we made the clot into a lump of flesh. And remember, again, we don't include an egg or anything, with one thing turning into another thing, turning into another thing, without any addition from anything else. We made from the lump bones. Then we covered the bones with flesh. Then we developed him into another creation. So blessed is Allah, the best of creators. We developed the seed into a clot, then we developed the clot into a lump, then we developed the lump into bones, then we clothed the bones in flesh, then we produced it into another creature, and that's from Clear Quran. That's the alternate translation there. So, regarding P.T. Myers, he said about this.
Science here.
What?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What do you feel contradicts science here?
Well, okay.
The sequence is wrong.
As I was saying before,
the problem is the sequence is wrong as described in the Quran.
Yeah, you interrupted.
That's not how things are built, and the Quran is quite adamant about what the sequence is.
Yeah.
Actually,
so let me continue, if I may, Bogey. P.Z. Myers said that when we look at the descriptions of embryology in the Quran and we look at descriptions of embryology from Aristotle, they're the same. We see a correspondence. Aristotle also described the emergence of bones and muscles in sequence, and it's like the Quran. Now, at that point, when he said that, because it happened to be at a place where I was physically myself, there was somebody from the Islamic Education and Research Academy named Adnan Rashid who jumped in. And the Islamic Education and Research Academy is an academy in exactly the same way that Prager University isn't a university. He interrupted to point out that the Quran says the bones come first, then the flesh, then the muscles. And PZ corrected, saying that these things develop simultaneously. Refusing to admit any error, Adnan then lied and said that the Arabic word thumma also means simultaneously. And I've gotten from a number of Arabic speakers that is incorrect.
Yeah, that is incorrect.
Guys, let me make sure, before I respond, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying that the bones and the flesh, they form simultaneously, and the Quran is stating that the bones form first, then the muscle form first. Is that second? I'm sorry. Is that what you're saying?
I want to make sure I get the quote correct.
Okay.
It says, where was that
well,
line?
Let's just talk about what the Quran is stating here, as far as what you feel is the error here.
Right, it is the order. I just want to make sure that I read the order correctly.
Okay, sure. And P.Z. Meyer, he is an atheist apologist. Is that correct?
Well, there's no such thing as an atheist apologist, so he can't be something that there isn't.
He tries to promote atheism. Is that correct?
He advocates for reason and science, yes.
Okay, so we cannot really use him as a reference.
Why? Because he's not.
Why can I not use Dr. Zakir Naik as a reference?
Use him.
You're welcome to try to use a failed apologist if you want to. Okay. I would love.
He's a failed apologist.
I would have so much fun.
Let's quote real scientists who do not have a stake in the game, who's not trying to convert you to Christianity, Islam, or atheism.
What do you mean? Not have a stake in the game,
Mr. Nadir? Everyone has a stake in this game.
Okay.
How is it possible?
So you don't have objective references. P.Z. Meyer, I'm sorry.
I'm using an actual professional.
Dr. William Lane Craig is no more better than P.Z. Meyer. Sorry.
Okay,
you gotta be kidding me.
Let's play your no true Scotsman fallacy and find out which biologist we need to refer to.
Let's just go to the verse. What do you feel is contradicting science here?
The order of progression.
Okay.
As I said,
or what was created, or what do you?
Yeah, that the Quran says the bones come first, then the flesh, then the muscles.
The bones come first, then
the flesh, then
first
the muscles.
bones is okay. Let me just make sure before I respond. First, bones is created. Then after bones is created, then muscles come after is created after that. That's what you believe.
In the two translations that I read for you earlier, let's see, the one from Clear Quran said, then we develop the seed into a clot, then we develop the clot into a lump, then we develop the lump into bones.
Mm-hmm. Then we develop the lump into bones. Okay, and
then the other one, let me see, what was it? Where did I quote? No, that's from Abdel Halim. We made the clot into a lump of flesh. We made the what?
Does it specifically state that flesh is created after bones. Does it say that?
What it specifically says was just like what I just read. We developed the clot into a lump, then we
It does
developed the
not
lump into
state what you
bones.
want it to state.
It does
So the
state.
Quran
I
does
don't
not
want
say
it
that
to
flesh
state
is
anything.
created.
What I want it to state is that we shouldn't believe anything on faith. We shouldn't make bullshit excuses for miracles. We should accept reason. That's what I would want it to say, but it doesn't say what I want it to say. Instead, it says we develop the lump into bones, then we close the bones with flesh. That's what it actually says. It's not
but
what
it
I want
doesn't
to
say
and it's
we
not what you
created.
want it to say either, but that is what it says.
All right.
Which surah are we talking about?
Surah 23, verses 14. Actually, I don't. In this translation, I don't know.
So what the controversy here is, the Quran said we closed the bones with flesh.
Mhm.
So people then
The
came to
bones
the
exist
conclusion.
first, and
So
then
people came to the conclusion that the author of the Quran is stating that flesh is created after
or is at
bone.
least clothing the bones. The bones are created first.
But the Quran is silent once again of when the flesh was created. Was the
But
flesh
it's not
created
silent about
before
this.
the bone?
It's explicit about not being silent about
Hold on.
this. It says
Aron,
it created the bones first, then post clothed the bones in
we
flesh.
closed it, not created. Okay.
Clothed,
Let me,
not cloned.
without
clothed.
interrupting me, let me just give you my understanding of the verse.
Okay.
So the verse said we create that it actually doesn't even talk about when. The word for creating is khalaqa, and that's nowhere to be even found for bones. That's nowhere even to be found for flesh. So when bones was actually created, we don't know because the Quran doesn't state that.
So how would you
flesh,
translate Surah 23 verse 14? How would you translate that?
well, I would translate it exactly in the like what you read in the English, that bones was closed with flesh.
Well, I said
That's all.
clothed, like, with clothes
Closed.
on it. But yeah, it's covered in either sense.
Covered. You're covered, yeah, covered.
So
That's all. But
bones
when
first.
bones were created, when
Bones
flesh
first,
was
then
created,
flesh.
is not in there.
Then we developed the lump into bones. Then we clothed the bones with flesh. How is that sequence not there?
But when were they created?
Bones first, then flesh. That's what
bones was created first,
says.
then flesh was created. Is that the way you're reading it?
That is the only way it can be read. Yes, in multiple translations. Bones first.
No,
then
that's
flesh.
not. That's your interpretation.
It's not my interpretation. I'm reading it straight. Abdel Halim says we made from the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh. So bones first, then flesh. Not an interpretation. That's explicit. That's what it says.
Do you agree with me?
No matter how you want to interpret it, that's what it says.
Do you? Okay, the word created.
This is just a second. This is as clear as when you are. Just a second. Let me clarify a point here.
Yeah, Bogey, let him speak and then.
Okay, let's speak. Okay, speak.
You see, you agree that the word created is nowhere to be found in this verse, just like sperm was nowhere found inside chapter 86, verse 3.
I don't agree on that.
It's the second word in the verse. What are you talking about?
I can't agree on that.
Show me where it was created.
If it shows up in the English translation, I don't know Arabic. I have to assume that they're basing it on something.
I'm going to read you the Arabic on chapter 14, okay?
We're in chapter 23, right?
14,
23.
actually.
Yes.
You want 23?
Yes.
Okay, let me go to 23.
In one of them, it's in one translation they say the word developed, and in another translation they said the word made. But in both, they end with the statement that Allah is the best of creators for doing this. So it's all of this, whether it's called made or whether it's called developed, it's still a creation.
Okay, let me read you 23:14. Okay, the second word is actually khalaqna. Okay, that's the very second word. The first word is thumma. So there's something happens after something. What is happening before is in verse 13, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be verse 13. ثم جعلناه نطفة في قرار مكين. قرار المكين in this case is the womb. It couldn't be anywhere else. So there you go. After it's in the womb, then خلقنا النطفة علقة. Then he turns the nutfa into alaqa. Woman, just a qarar makin, nothing else. Okay? فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً. That's a lump. Okay? So then we create the alaqa into a mudgha. Okay? And then فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عَظْمًا. And then this mudgha creates bone. This is as if you are making omelette, and this is the sequences of the recipe. You have to get the egg out of the bone, you have to break the bone, and then you have to put the egg in the pan. Otherwise, it's not going to be an omelette. Okay, فَكَسَوْنَا الْعَظْمَ لَحْمًا ثُمَّ أَنشَأْنَاهُ خَلْقًا. Okay? خَلْقًا آخر فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ, because he's the best. Okay? Except he gets the sequence wrong. That's the problem. That's why P.Z. Myers stepped into the argument and said, no, that's not how the embryo builds up. That is the wrong sequence.
Yeah, that these things form simultaneously.
Well,
there's never a time when you have bones with no flesh on them. That does not happen. That is factually false.
Okay, well, let's first deal with the first objection about bones are created first and then flesh is created. So can I share my desktop here real quick, just so we can read the verse together? Okay, let's do that. So share screen. Okay,
and I apologize that it has to be done in English, but I'm American, so that's
no, English is good because the English, your entire window, application window. Okay, here we go. The English is good. There's nothing wrong with that. I think the English is going to pretty much explain it. Can you see my desktop, the verse?
Yeah, give me just a second. I'll pull it up.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So now, now we can look at my screen and it can say here, so we see that as a
I can't read that. It's so small, but I mean, I'm on the same web page. So which
let me make it bigger.
No, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's on my screen. It's still going to be small. Which surah and verse are we looking at?
Is it verse 14?
Okay, so we're looking at
verse 14.
23:14, yeah.
23:14.
Yeah.
Okay. So the word right here, this is the word for create. See where it says we created. That's create. Okay, so every time I hover my mouse over this, you're going to see it says create. So when it says here, and the embryonic lump,
which word is create?
Is khalaqa, right here. See that? We created.
Hold on, I got to change screens to go see what you're highlighting. Which word? Which word in English is the word create in this translation?
We made. Then we made or we created.
We made. Okay, so that's create. Okay.
Yeah. So it does talk about, so what I'm saying here, it talks about we created, then we created the something which clanged into something which is like a lump of flesh. Okay. And then we made, then we created mudgha, then we created that lump of flesh into bones. Okay, great. So then we closed the bones with flesh. So you don't really need to go to the Arabic. But so the question is using the word flesh over here. Now, flesh can be anything. It can be muscles. It could be anything. It could be cells. It could be anything. I guess
it could be anything in this sense, because we know that there's never a point when there's bones that are not covered with flesh. We know that never happens.
Okay, hold on. That's a different objection.
Lahm in this case is actually meat. Just like water, this is meat.
Okay. So let me continue. And so when we look at the word flesh over here, which is lahm, which is meat, whatever.
Exactly.
We do not find anywhere in the text when it was created. Can you confirm that? When it is created?
No, I can confirm the opposite, because in order to cover bones with flesh, you have to have bones, and it says that. It actually does say that you have the bones, and then you made from the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh. So bones first, then flesh. Yeah, every translation, that's how it says.
Doesn't mean create. Do you understand that?
Does the word create even matter here? We have bones, and then we cover the bones with flesh.
God. Oh my gosh, yeah, words matter. Why
are you arguing the wrong point this whole time? So we have bones. Whether you say made or whether you say developed, doesn't matter. So you have bones, and then you cover the bones with flesh. No, that does not happen, ever. So this is yet another time that the Quran turned out to be wrong.
Wait a second. We're talking about two different objections here. The
No,
first
we're not
objection, which I'm dealing with. Wait, Boraz, let me finish. I can only respond to one guy at a time. The first objection is you stated that the Quran stated that flesh was formed or created after the bones are formed, but the text doesn't say that. It only talked about this clothing thing, which I don't know what it means when it's like clothing. I guess we could, I guess, probably
How can you
guess.
close? How can
the
you
objection,
close?
The objection,
Okay.
once again.
Here we go again. Here we go again. The Quran does not explicitly state that flesh. Let's interpret it as muscles. We could maybe it's a good one or whatever it is was created.
It should be muscle, yeah, but it doesn't really matter. The objection was
okay.
And
it doesn't say when this flesh was created. Where does it say it was created?
The complaint, once again, if I could get this out, was from the apostate prophets list, and this was that flesh forms after bones, and that is in every translation.
Say it was formed after bones. He's wrong. Look at the text. Where?
Yes, the only possible interpretation is that there are
your
bones.
Interpretation.
And then
there you go.
Yeah, because it's reading. We're reading something, so all we can do is interpret what the words mean. You string all the words together. We have to interpret each word individually, what it means in this context, and then we have to interpret it all together. So we understand that there are bones, and then after that, the bones are covered in flesh. So flesh forms after bones. That's every interpretation, every translation. There you go.
No, that's your interpretation. Let me give you my. Wait a second. Why do you guys want to get to?
No, I'm dying to hear this. What is your interpretation?
Okay, my interpretation is exactly what the text states, which it states that we closed the bones with flesh, but when the flesh was created is not stated in the text. When it was it made at the same time that the bones were made? They could have been made simultaneously. Then once they've been made, then we closed the bones with flesh. So all of that this is another argument from silence. It is so clear from this text
that not an argument from silence.
Guys, don't interrupt me, guys. When we talk about flesh, it never stated khalaqa, which is a word right here. We created. When it was created, when it was made, is nowhere in the text at all. Now, if you want to interpret it because it said sakana, we clothed the bones as flesh. Therefore, I think this was created first, and then this was created. That's your own interpretation, which the text of the Quran doesn't state. Just like the text of the Quran doesn't state. In the backbone, the text of the Quran doesn't state most of what you guys are saying.
Let's understand this verse like the 7th century Arabs would understand it, okay? Because they
that? Oh, you're
the ones who wrote it.
Go ahead.
Because it's in Arabic and they would be understood in Arabic.
Let me stop sharing here.
So let's understand it like Muhammad would have understood it, okay? Because there is no other interpretation.
Wait a second. We're not going to play that game because
now
we're
not playing that game. This is not a game.
You are doing damage control because you cannot find what you want explicitly in the text. As I have shown you, when the flesh is created, is nowhere in the text.
So I did show that. We're just going to have to agree to disagree then, because I've shown all these contradictions. I've shown all these errors in the Quran, and you've tried to find an excuse that didn't work, and you tried to accuse us of fallacies we didn't use. But I'm sorry if your failed arguments failed. That doesn't mean you get to declare victory. I'm sorry, you don't. You lose. You're done.
My point.
Every translation agrees with me. Sorry, we're done. That's it. I win. I don't,
because of translations. Oh no, actually, I'm reading the translation.
It doesn't matter what translations. It doesn't matter. You read it in the original Arabic. It still works. It still makes the point I said it did. Now, what I'd like to do at this point, I had another one that I wanted to address today, and that was going to go back to visiting Adam and Eve, because we can actually apply science to that, but we'll save that for the next time.
Sure.
If you notice, all of these had a link. Now, I went through a apostate prophets list of things, and there was a lot of things I didn't want to touch yet because I haven't read them yet myself. But almost all of these, except for I think chapter 23, almost all of these I had already read, and so I'd already made notes about them on my own, so I could address those, and they were all related to sperm and embryological development and all that sort of thing. And the one that I hadn't read was the one that me and PZ had already talked directly with the IERA about that. So I thought, well, this is all related, so we can cover that in all one block. Next time around, I will have another block of things that are all related. I don't know yet if we're going to talk about, the firmament and the sun and the moon and everything. I'm tempted to do that, but I really want to, because that's the real meat, I think, and we want to save that for last. So I think I'm going to be covering some other things, and I'll probably include Adam and Eve in the next time. Now, in the meantime, for right now, you'd mentioned, and I'm actually curious to hear this, you had mentioned in the last talk that we had about Surah 7, you said that you had scientific evidence of the Quran. And I just want to caution you that I was raised in a Mormon household, and the apologetics that I heard for Mormonism were mirrored by Muslim sites arguing the almost exact same sort of things in declaration of their faith. The same kind of archaeological finds, the same kind of weird prophetic claims, the same kind of things about, well, if it was precisely on this longitude, and if you draw the line to this other thing, it exactly matches that number. And so this could only be true if Mormonism was true. That's the kind of arguments we get. So that's the same kind of vacuity that I'm going to expect from you. And I want you to understand that before we start.
Well, what I can promise you is I'll bring you the same standard, the same clarity of the issue about the flood. The flood was local in the Quran. It is not. It's not a worldwide flood.
It's not, because it declares all people to be the heirs of. It declares the Saudis to be heirs of Noah.
Quran doesn't say that. But anyways, well,
we did go over how the Quran does say that. We'll agree to disagree again.
I think that the problem here is the biggest disagreement, I think, which we have over here is I have an expectation for the Quran to explicitly state certain things. And then what happens is we look at the text and it doesn't explicitly state that, but you're like, but that's just the best interpretation, and you have to be dumb if you don't interpret it that way. And that's the crux of your argument.
Well, we know that in that one line it can't be referring to water. That's clear. That's certain. We know that. It's
that's your interpretation.
And it wouldn't matter if it's talking about water or sperm or embryo. However you interpret it, it's still wrong. Every way to Sunday, it's still wrong.
That's not true.
So there's not a right way.
Many Muslim scholars about this. I've shown them. Look, the verse is actually talking about water, but all these internet trolls like Apostate Prophet, they're turning it into sperm.
But the internet troll, he's going to be delighted to hear that.
Yeah, of these. That's why he's chicken to come here today.
Oh, except that he contacted me a few days ago when he found out that you were talking smack about him, and he asked to be on the show. But when I told him that we were doing it Sunday at this time, he lamented that he's on an airplane right now. Otherwise, he would be here because he asked me for a special invitation to be involved in this show. Let's have a fair debate.
Let's have a fair debate between him and I will.
I'm not going to make any arrangements or agreements for him. If he wants to be on this podcast, I'm happy to have him on this podcast, but I'm not going to make any promises on his behalf. He will speak on his behalf.
All right, that's fine. That's fine. I will confirm with him. I think he's running. I think he's feeding you a lot of crap. But I will email him and I will confirm.
In this episode, haven't we?
Well, look, I don't want to do any put downs and all that because again, I could return the favor. I don't want to go there.
I don't honestly think you can. I think you're writing checks you can't cash right now. So
the issue, which I think is a problem here, is, my response to all of these alleged claims is the same thing. That's not what the text of the Quran states. But then theirs is going back to.
So
it's not explicit
over and over
in the
again
text.
That's what it was. And we're going to do more later. But right now, I want to hear about your scientific evidence for the Quran.
It's getting kind of late. It's like almost 4 o'clock over here. Let's pick it up for another time. Yeah.
Sincerely, and this is going to sound weird. Thank you, Nadir, for being on here. I genuinely enjoy, and I mean this with all sincerity. Your conduct has been, I think, appropriate, and I appreciate it. And I want you to understand that I really, really mean that. Okay?
I'm better than Matt Slick, that's for sure.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I want to return the favor in kind, and I realize there's 2 of us on here, and it's impossible. I don't want to put the reins around muzzle on Bogey and dominate, but sometimes he and I are going to have slightly different points at the same time, and I apologize that it works out that way. It's not my intent. I do need somebody who understands Arabic to help me out with it. So I enormously appreciate Bogey's assistance on this. And of course, he's been with me on this series since the beginning. I would have no idea of the Quran at all if I didn't have him walking me through where the translation says I'm reading them are not actually correct, so that I have some other reference that I can go check and say, yep, Bogey's right, on this or that. Yeah. So, and that's also why I liked having Rada on. It impressed me that the first thing she did was like, take your side against Bogey. on that's stellar. That shows objectivity. So I mean, applaud her for that. Anyway, you're right. It is late, and I did sincerely appreciate the talk. We will do it again. I want to agree on when. I don't mean for this to be an every week thing, but it's kind of working out to that, and I'm kind of having fun with it. So I'm going to leave it up to you, Nadir.
I'll be here next week.
You'll be here next week. We will do another episode of scientific errors in the Quran. Same time next week. This was 5 p.m. Greenwich time, which for me was 11 o'clock a.m. Central in Texas. If you'd like to be part of this kind of a podcast, if you want to take a part in this topic, please contact me. I'd be happy to have you on. And thank you both. And I'm going to go ahead and close it out.
Okay, thanks.